is David Lichtenstein, and welcome to the Yeshiva Shalmaila. And we have a wonderful program. We're going to be discussing about this week's parsha, which is Ish Imay v'Aviv Tiro v'Shabsaisai Tishmayru Kibbud Av, and in particular, something that is not really discussed. Your child wants to move out of town, or to Eretz Yisroel, or you do, and you're not going to be able to be Mekayim Kibbud Av Karoi. How are you going to be Mekayim Achileu Mashkeyu? Gemara says that Yaakov Avinu was nenash for the 14 years he spent by Beis Lavan. So the question is it permitted? Is it a violation of Kibbud Av or not? We're going to be also speaking to about moving to Eretz Yisroel, the risk to family, to children, going off the derech. Are the numbers true, aren't they? And what can you do about it? We're going to have on from Yerushalayim, Rav Nochum Eisenstein, famous Rav, Mishamish B'Kodesh by Rabbi Yashiv, the Paisik of the last 30 years. He was also made by Rabbi Yashiv the head of the Geirus Bezdin, certainly an expert on living in Eretz Yisroel. We will have from Brooklyn an Einikel of Rav Zalman Sortotzkin, the Lutzke Rav, Haber of the Znaim L'Torah, Rabbi Dr. Benzion Sortotzkin. He refers to go as Dr. Benzion Sortotzkin, a clinical psychologist, an expert in family relations. He'll be speaking about it from both a practical as well as a halachic view. We will have from Ramat Beit Shemesh, Rabbi Yaakov Haber, who is a Rav there. He was he's a musmach of Rav Ruderman, a Talmud of Beryl Soloveitchik, Zichron Levracha. He was the Rav of the Lakewood Koil in Melbourne for 6 years, runs a very beautiful, large community of expats, almost all, foreigners in Eretz Yisroel. He's going to be speaking about, the dangers to family. We will have from Cincinnati, Ohio, Rabbi Avrohom Weinreb, Rav in Cincinnati. He'll be speaking about some of the amazing, advantages, enlightenment, personal growth that can come from living out of town. So we'll be covering this from all aspects. By the way, the next 2 weeks we'll be speaking of some of our topics will be guns in shul, basically what happened now in Chabad in California, muktzah, haitzah, training, just like we have Hatzalah. Should we be training in every shul? There should be one or two people that know how to use a firearm, that keep it locked up in the shul. When they get to shul, they take it out and they put it on, but that way you don't have issues of haitzah. Should we, be doing more to protect ourselves? We'll be do another program on vaccinations, which keeps coming up in the news. And also there's a big request for women in the workplace, both how to deal with them if you're a woman as well as if you're a man. So we have a number of very interesting programs coming up. Before we go, I want to speak about this week's Parsha Se'avart Kedoshim to you. And Chazal say that the word Kedusha means separated, muvdal, right? Everything that's sanctified means it's separate. So I want to speak about Kedoshim to you from a different point of view. Something you may have heard of, but not necessarily. It may be something new. And here's the social commentary. Last week, a Dr. Kapoor was sentenced for selling opioids. He runs a large pharmaceutical company here in the United States, Insys. Him and the Sackler family run their own. Sackler is a tens of billion dollar family, wealthy family. And what have they been doing? The opioid crisis in America, which has taken 400,000 lives, more than World War II in the last 20 years. And why are people drugging up? Well, why do people get addicted? It's depression, unhappiness, anger, frustration, disappointment. It's mental health makkah is one of the greatest killers in the United States. Suicide for young people is the single largest cause of death. And there's no house that doesn't have somebody who's not struggling with some mental health issue, practically, a depression issue, etc. So all this addiction and unhappiness is something that threatens us. But, there was a Gallup poll, and I believe we spoke about it in the past, that says that the happiest people in America are Orthodox Jews. right? This was a poll that took over 3 years to do. If you Google online the article, Happiest Man in America, New York Times, Eretz Yisroel, they wrote about it. But the article basically says that the Gallup did a poll, who's the happiest man in America? Who are the happiest people? So they said, men are happier than women. People who I think are over 50 are happier than younger people. People who are married are happier than people who are unmarried. People who are self-employed are happier than people who are not self-employed. People who make more than $100,000 a year are happier than people who aren't. The happiest state is Hawaii. The happiest religion is Judaism. Judaism, Christianity, Catholicism, Islam, etc. is Judaism. The happiest Jews are the Orthodox. Happiest people have a sense of humor, etc. They put like 10 different qualifications. So the New York Times decided that they were going to try to find the happiest man. So they went to, the happiest race is Asian. Interesting, right? So they just said they have to find an Orthodox Asian Jew who's married with children, has a sense of humor, is self-employed, is over the age of 50, and lives in Hawaii. And they found the ger, Alvin Wang, I think his name is. So they called him up and they said, you know that you are the happiest man in America. And his response was, is this a joke? So it's a humorous story, but the takeaway is that it says, the Farish, New York Times, the Farish, and it says that we are the happiest group of people, are the Orthodox Jews. So I want to give you a hypothesis of possibly one of the reasons. Okay, why are we the happiest people in the United States? And there's so much noise in the world. It's just endless. Now, if you are unfortunate enough to have social media, Google people spend 7 hours a day on an average on the internet. It's your average. It's astonishing, the number and the noise. Do you know that there are now, I think, 23 Democratic candidates for president, and we're going to be hearing about them ad nauseum. Mamish, they'll hock it shining for the next 18 months. There are so many of them. There are 5 just whose letters start with the letter B. Biden, Bennett, Beto, Bernie, right? Just the second letter of the alphabet. So how do we find a place of refuge and peace? How do we mavdal ourselves from all this noise? Well, who's the first person who did it? It was Noach. Andrelamusya bala olam, everything, al rayas, shvichas damim, gezel, everything you could imagine. What did Noach do, the first person? He sailed away. He created a teva, an ark. An island. He found peace. He floated literally above the storm. Well, the question is, how do we find that sense of peace? And why is that sense of peace so important? Because if we could find peace, we can help the mental health of our families. We can separate ourselves from the depression, from the anxiety, which is mostly fueled by, social pressure, etc. Right? How do we do that? Well, one way is to lock yourself up. That's not so easy. So here's something interesting. The Gemara in Eruvin says, Alma dazlina mine kebehilula damya. The world that we will all pass from is like a chasana. So the Toldos Yaakov Yosef, he lived at the late 1600s, early 1700s. The great scribe, basically, of the Baal Shem. Most of our Torahs of Baal Shem and Magid come from him. He says something beautiful. I think it's from the Magid or the Baal Shem. He says, the world is a 3-ring circus, just like a wedding. Do you know that? I mean, think of by a wedding, there's the chassan's parents, the guests are coming from the chassan's father and the chassan's mother, the kala's mother, the kala's father. The kala has her friends, the chassan has his friends. They have the Rabbanish friends they need for the Siddur Kedushin. They may have business friends, family friends, neighbors. Then they have all the different. They have the smorgasbord. You have the chassan's tish. You have the pre-dance music, the dance music. You have the food for the people who do eat meat, the people who don't eat meat, the people who kashrus only eat fish, the vegetarian. It's a 3-ring circus, a wedding. But what's the purpose of the whole wedding? Those few moments when there's utter quiet under the chuppah, when the chassan looks at the kala and he says, Harei et mekadeshes li, you are sanctified to me forever. And more than that, let's make something sanctified together. That is the purpose. And let's say they forget to ring, so you have the 3-ring circus, but it serves no purpose. The whole purpose of the 3-ring circus was the Harei et mekadeshes li. So the Talmud says, you know what the purpose of the whole three-ring circus, all the tumult, the elections and the wars and the politicians and pro-Trump and anti-Trump and the environmentalists, it's all for one thing, is that one Yid should tell his wife, Harei Mukadeshes, and build something that's removed from the world, separated, that could float upon this whole tumult. Someplace in time that we can do this. And you know, another place where the Yid does it is on Shabbos. The Teva was separated in space. Shabbos is muvdal in time. It creates a place of peace in time. And the Torah is so medagdik that Shabbos should be a place of peace. Im tashiv mi Shabbos raglecha. Your legs, stop running. All running is to get to someplace. Shabbos, there's no place else to go to. Asais chafotzecha v'yoyim kadoshi. V'karasa l'Shabbos eineg. L'kdosh Hashem mechubad. Stop the business talk. Don't think about it. Don't talk about it. Make your home a sanctuary, your life a sanctuary, a place that's mugda, Shabbos Kodesh, separated. You float like the oil floats. The oil floats on top of all liquid. We put water in and oil on top, and the wick floats on it. We should be able to have the power to float above the whole fray and keep our peace. And you know, it says, the Balatanya writes, he says, Vayinofash, the Targum says, V'noch. He says, it's Miloshin Noach. He says, Shabbos is like Noach. Noach found the place of peace. He says, on Shabbos, we can find our place of peace. And it reminds me of the story, I've said it over in the past, that there was a tzaddik in Europe. His name was Reb Mordechai of Lechovitch. He lived in the early 1700s. He was right after the Maggid. And his Chassidim were coming to him, and they said, and I've understood the story on different levels. So I'll tell you one level. And, you know, he had many very great Chassidim, and among them was an ignoramus and an Amoritz. In those days, they didn't have many Chadarim. The parents were poor. Somebody was Nisyasim, wasn't smart. So he passed by, and he said, Rabbi, can I ask you a question? Said, oh, great and profound. Lechovitch said, certainly. So he said, I was learning the parsha. It says, Vayavay Noach ubanav v'ishtay ubanav v'eshes banav el hateva. So this Amoritz asked the Lechovitch, he said, how did Noach, his sons, his wife, how did they fit into a word? Because the word teva could mean an ark. It could also mean a word. How did they fit into a word? And of course, all the Chassidim started laughing. His followers, like such a... And the Lechovitch's face got very serious, and he says, you're saying something very deep and holy, he tells the Amoritz. He says, when there's all kinds of noise in the world, and Noach certainly lived in a time of noise, right? It was the noisiest time, right? What did he do? He entered into a word. And I understand that means the words of Torah, the words of Tefillah, right? We are blessed, Klal Yisrael, that we can go, we could take out a Gemara, we could take out a Shulchan Aruch with the Shach and the Taz or the Magen Avram if you're learning Archaim. We could sit by the Shabbos table. We could ask riddles. We could discuss the Parsha. We can enter into the Word. So there's different ways. We see Noach created both a physical world of the Teva, which we can do in our homes, but the Lechovitch says he also created a metaphysical place, the word of Torah. Shabbos, we could create a word where we don't speak about anything, a Teva in time. And I suggest to you that if we can do that, we could become Nivdal, we could become a different type of Kedoshim to you. We separate, we create islands in space and in time for our families. What does that mean? We could create that place of beauty where we, ourselves, and our children should flourish. A place where we could turn around at a Shabbos table and look at our wives. We had a word of Torah, a word of Tefillah, and say, you know what? When I said Harei Mekudeshesli so many years ago, I really created it. And we have the health of our children to show for it, as well as our own. Before we go to our guests, let me ask the riddle of the week. ask a riddle for Kedoshim and a riddle for Emor. So here's the first riddle. The riddle is Ish Imay v'Aviv Tiro v'es Shabsoisei Tishmayru. So what does Rashi brings the Gemara in Yuvamis Tafheim at Beis? It contextualizes, it juxtaposes Shabbos l'moira Av, Tiro v'es Shabsoisei, to tell you that if your father tells you to be Machal Shabbos, you don't listen. Why? So the Gemara says Ish Imay v'Aviv Tiro v'es Tishmayru. Kulchem chayavim b'kvaydi. Your father also has to listen to the boss, Rabbi Nishalem. So if he tells you to be Machal Shabbos, you don't listen to him because he's unempowered. Because you have to listen to them. He has to listen. Kulchem chayavim b'kvaydi. He's not empowered to do it. He also has to listen to the Rabbi Nishalem. The question is, the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramat brings in Yeridei Siman Reish Mem. Right, we spoke about this Siman today in Sif Yud Ches. That the halacha is that if a person has a father who's irreligious, and the irreligious, he's Einoi Oisa Ma'isa Amcha, and he says, excuse me, Tatala, I'm irreligious, but can you please bring me a coffee? So the Ramah says that if somebody's not Oisa Ma'isa Amcha, you don't do it. Right? Machlokes Beis Yosef, Ramah, it's complex, but let's go according to the Shita. Certainly the Beis Yosef holds if you're not Oisa Ma'isa Amcha, you don't do it. Even something that's not an Aveira. So if on a not Aveira we say, if he's not Oisa Ma'isa Amcha, you don't do it, why do you have to have a special limud to tell you if he tells you to be an Aveira, al Kulchem Chayavim B'Chvaydi? Just say, forget about, because it's an Aveira and Kulchem Chayavim. Say just, he's not Oisa Ma'isa Amcha, he's not my father, like I've been listening to him. That is question number one, and it's inappropriate because this week's we're talking about Kibbud Av Emor. I'm going to challenge ourselves to come up with a riddle that also has to do with Kibbud Av because it's sort of this week's program. So the Rashba in Shalos Tshuvas Chelik Aleph Siman Chav Zayin brings a Shiloh on that the Chachmei Provincia, that's Provence in France, sent to the Rashba. I imagine when he was in Spain. He says that it says in Teres Koyanim, Emor Ela Kehanim. So the Gemara says you have to say Imay Ula Aviv. So the Teres Koyanim says why? He says Imay. He says you know who a person's mother is, but by Aviv, you don't know for sure somebody's the father. It's only a Chazaka Roiv Bilay Sachar Abal, right? You say that it's a Roiv or a Chazaka Shiloh, but it's because we assume they're living together. It's the father usually. The husband who usually impregnates the wife. Based on that, we assume that it's your father. This is pre-DNA testing, which you discussed about a few weeks. So that's the Chiddush. It says, even la'aviv, even though it's a suffix. You would say, maybe I shouldn't be kahuna. Why should I take the suffix daraisa, of being matama myself? Maybe say suffix daraisa l'chumra, and I shouldn't. So he says, that's why it says aviv. So the Rabbi Yitzchak HaTzarfati sent the question to the Rashba. He said, I don't understand. He said, Manashach, if this fellow is his father, so he's allowed to be matama to him. His father, you're allowed to be matama to. What are you saying? Maybe it's a suffix and it's not his father. Well, guess what? If it's not his father, Bubala, then you ain't a Kayin, because Kahuna Leviya Yisrael is patrilineal. It's not matrilineal. It goes after the father. She says, so what's Shannon the Taras Kainim that says that the Chiddush of Aviv is, because we say Aviv, and we say you go after the Chazaka the Rav, that says it's the father. And if it's not the father, you should certainly be able to be Matama to him, because he's just maybe a plain old Yisrael. That's for sure, Rav, you go after Yisrael. So what's Pshat in the Taras Kainim? Those are our two riddles for the week. Let's go to our fabulous program. We have on the phone with us Hagayin Rav Nochum Eisenstein from Yerushalayim. He was the Makurev, Shamash B'Kodesh, with the Rashke Bahag, Rabbi Yashiv Zichron Lavracha. He also made him the head of the Geras Bezdin and many other shtellas. He's a Rav in Yerushalayim. Welcome, Reb Nochum.
Shalom Aleichem to all the listeners.
So let's talk about our program this week, which is about, I had a parent, he lives near me, and his kids moved to Israel. Baruch Hashem, one is in Kyle, one isn't in Kyle.
And he should be very proud of it, and he should appreciate it, and he should realize how big of a zchus it is for him.
Okay, and so my question is, he sits in America, he has a business in America, and he sits by me and he's crying. He says, "Vanoichi almana amal galmuda, ra'azuva v'galmuda." And my question to you is, and I looked at him and I said, I never realized that. You have people, they have a few kids, they all moved to Eretz Yisroel. They left their family behind, their parents behind. There's nobody to take care of them. They're getting older. They go to the doctor by themselves, etc. Do you think that this is something that should be looked at halachically as a correct approach?
Yeah, there's very clear halachic guidelines as to what Kibbud Av aim is mechayev, what it obligates the son to do. And every case has to be dealt with on an individual basis to see whether this goes into the chiyuv of Kibbud Av aim, exactly what it is. Now, Kibbud Av aim is not what Western society may say, that you have to come and take care of your parents because it's hard for them to manage themselves. That's what we have to know every case. What a choshev a rav who knows the situation, and he knows Hilchos Kibbud Av aim. He knows the Rashban Yavamis, and the Gra and all the poskim hold like the Rashban Yavamis, what the gather of Kibbud Av aim is. So if it's to be such a situation that he really has to go back because Kibbud Av aim is mechayev that, there's no question he has to go back. But if Kibbud Av aim is not mechayev that, and the Torah says,
explain to our Olam what Kibbud Av is mechayev and what it's not mechayev.
No. So you want to give? I should give a shir klali on Kibbud Av aim, not for 5 or 10 minutes.
Not a shir klali. Give us some headlines.
Kibbud Av aim has very clear hagdoras. Some of them might have to ask Das Torah and the Shaila, but that's what's name. It's Kibbud Av aim doesn't mean that. Listen, in the old days, Pashit, in the old days, people went to learn in Mir and other places in Europe before they went for 2-3 years without coming back. When I came to Eretz Yisroel, and I'm still from a semi-old door, I did not go back to home for 3 years. There was no telephones. There was no Skype. There was no nothing. I mean, once a year for my birthday, I used to go to the post office and had to order a Mechov Yafed for 3 minutes so we can speak. And we lived with letters. Every year we sent a letter. For 3 years, I did not go back. My brother didn't go back for 3 years either.
Did your parents have any other? Did you have any other siblings in America?
I had some other siblings in America, but they had other siblings, but they definitely missed us.
Let's say you wouldn't have had other siblings, and your parents would have been left all alone. What would you feel about that?
I have to know exactly what the situation is. When my father wasn't well, and there was no one else really to take care of my parents, and I went and I discussed it with Rav Shach, and Rav Shach gave me very clear guidelines what to do. And
what did he say? Share it with us.
First thing you have to know is that that's a Shabsai Tishmoiri, that you're steiging and learning, and your learning is the most important things. And the biggest chus your parents can have, if you're sitting and learning in Eretz Yisroel, and whether they appreciate it or don't appreciate it, the Olam Emes is going to be a big chus for them. And that'll help them a lot. Maybe it's a situation that there's no one else to take care of them, and there's no other way that to make arrangements, and then and it won't be on the cheshbon, the pashut of shmiras mitzvahs and steiging chedema. Then you have to know it. If you have a peculiar case like that, a very peculiar case like that, then you have to consult with Das Torah. You should get all the pratim. He should get all the exactly what's going on, and he'll decide what to do. But there's no general answer for that. The general answer is that the person has to be steiging, and he feels he can steig better in Eretz Yisroel and Shemiras HaMitzvos in Eretz Yisroel. That comes first. That's klor. What Rav Shach, I heard personally from Rav Shach when I heard from Rav Yasha many times. Now, if there'll be a peculiar case, which might be a little different, so then if they present it to authorize the poskim, and they should decide what has to be done.
And Rav Shach,
but generally speaking, the answer is no.
What did Rav Shach tell you to do?
Rav Shach said that if they can sit and learn in Eretz Yisroel and they'll manage somehow, that the schools of Limud Torah, they have a son learning in Eretz Yisroel, is more choshev for them.
So he told you to stay in Eretz Yisroel?
He told me to stay in Eretz Yisroel.
So who took care of your parents?
What's in Baruch Hashem? I went for a short amount of time, and Baruch Hashem, and my mother was a lot younger than my father, and she was healthier, and my mother had a Zedesha Schuyl, and she took care of my father with Mesiris Nefesh for many years. So for every person who has a situation, has to consult with an authorized Rav, Talmud Chacham, who knows Hilchus Kibbud Av, and who he knows the situation, he knows the exact situation, and have to make a decision accordingly.
And
a decision is based on the fact also what the situation is, where he's going back to America, and how much compromise he'll have to make on his limud HaTorah and his Kiyum HaMitzvahs.
And Nochum, at what point does somebody say, my Ruchnius doesn't come in front of your Gashmius? Like, when do you say, listen, I want to learn all day, and my parents, they'll go to a nursing home. I don't have to worry about them at all. Like, is there any point where you say that your
person definitely has to worry about his parents. The question is that he has to worry them to make sure they're set up and they're taken care of. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have to do it.
So I'm asking you a question. You have elderly parents. There's nobody. All the siblings have gone, or the one that's here is disinterested, or the ones that are here are disinterested. And you have a choice. You could put your parents in a nursing home where they're going to be fed and there's going to be an aide come around, or you could go back to America, join a koil in America, become a Rabbi in America, send your kids to yeshivas in America, and be there to escort your parents the last years of their world, of this world to the Olam Haba. What would you advise? I mean, do you say, look, my Ruchnius comes before my parents' Gashmias?
I would have to sit with the person. I would have to sit with the person after hear what is matzav of Kiyum HaMitzvahs and Limud here. After hear where he's going.
Clearly better. It's
I
clearly
just want to give you an
better.
example. I just want to give you an example. But I give an example which is not directly related to this case, but what it means going to Chutz La'aretz, especially out of town. One of the younger lights who lived by me in the shul who happens by me in the shul, and he just came back 2 days ago, and he came from the out-of-town city. And I don't want to mention names what the out-of-town city is. And he told me, he was there. He went to Shver and took good care of him, etc., etc. He says, one thing I have to tell you: there was no minion in town that davened Ma'ariv, not after Shkia. They all davened Ma'ariv b'plag. And he says he felt very bad. Not the daven after Shkia before this man before the first seis by the Shemeshwith. They daven Mincha and Ma'ariv. That was the only minyan they had for Mincha and Ma'ariv in town. It's a town which the Shkia there is very late. It's very close to the what's name. It's a when the west side of the time zones, and the Shkia there was about 8:30 at night. And the minyan, they didn't have minyan at 8:30 at night, so they davened at 7 o'clock. And so you didn't have a place where to daven in the whole city. And there's a place where there's a koil, but he says the koil wasn't around Beit Nismanim. I'm not sure if the koil was around if they would have such a minyan. He told me, he went and he didn't have a place to daven Ma'ariv. I'll just give you an example. When going to Chutz La'aretz, you have to know.
I understand that, but can I just point something out there? I'll put online 2 letters. One from Rabbi Yisrael Salanta, and one from the Chafetz Chaim, where the Chafetz Chaim writes that he came to a town that he had an issue where he could daven early that he wasn't happy about, right? Yeah. But not be mitzayer. The homeowner was an almana, whatever, where him and his wife were staying. And the Chafetz Chaim writes he chose to daven early rather than to be mitzayer, the host where he was staying.
No question about it. It was a one-time thing, and he went to his host, and you have to mechaber the host. There's no question about it. There's no question about it.
I'm saying, so is leaving
you
elderly
should be mitzayer the host, but you're talking about a one-time thing, and I'm talking about a person who should go kavua to live in such a place where there might be a big compromise. And so again, you ask a general question. You have to know what the matzah with the parents is. I mean, if someone else putting him to a nursing home is not an eitzah, but a nursing home, as much as they might take care of you, usually means that your mom is mekayim the misa. If you're familiar with nursing homes, that the people get tzabachim. But I want to tell you, parents who are in the matzah, that if they put into a nursing home, that it's unless the people at tzaddikim, the children of tzaddikim, they're willing to work 24 hours a day, they won't be able to keep their parents in their house or take care of their parents in their house. If a person's in the matter of assisted living and things like that, maybe he still can. But a person who needs 24-hour medical attention and nursing home, I don't know how much the children can do for them anyway.
Okay, so let's go to a case where the parents are in a situation that if they had assistance from their kids, they could keep them out of a nursing home, but it would mean them not moving to Eretz Yisroel, where they would have maybe a better koil and a better. What would you suggest?
Again, I have to hear where they're going to, what matzav of ruchnis they were in Eretz Yisroel. If they're Baruch Hashem in Eretz Yisroel, we still have places that the matzav of limud Torah, ein Torah Eretz Yisroel, that the matzav of kiyum and shmir some mitzvahs, and it's in kashrus and everything, chinuch, everything is in a higher level in Eretz Yisroel. So I have to take a lot of things into consideration. How much compromise does it mean? If they're going to a place like Lakewood, that Baruch Hashem, that there are places in Lakewood where you can find Kehillat and chinuch, which is prior to the level of Eretz Yisroel. But all these things have to be taken into consideration. The situation with the parents of the other siblings, how much they can do, what will be, etc., and it has to be dealt with in the individual situation. But there's no such thing as giving a general ruling, and every case has to be dealt with Yishuv Adas by a poisik who understands what Kibbud Av aim is mechayev.
Okay, let me, by the way, quote a Sefer Hasidim, Taf Kufnem, 940. He says like this: Tzarech haben lehizoyer al daigas aviv, shelo yelech lemerachik, v'loy b'makayim she'aviv v'imay daigen alav u'mitztarin alav, ki nenash ha'adam she'garam she'aviv v'imay daigim u'mitztarin alav.
Okay, so it's, instead of quoting a Sefer Hasidim, the right or the more accurate or the more nogea dika halacha l'maisa quote we have to have a quote is a Ramah in the end of Siman. It's a mechaber in the end of Siman reish mem. I'm not sure. I don't remember it's mechaber Ramah, but
I'll quote the mechaber exactly. I have it in front of me.
Talmud it's a Trumas edition.
Yeah, Talmud shereitz laleches lamakim acher shubayteach sheyiras simin bracha betalmudei l'fnei harav. He's absolutely certain, and the Paiskim say, how certain do you have to be? Like maybe you'll steig in the Cincinnati Kehillat or the Lakewood Kehillat much as you will in Eretz Yisroel. So you have to be absolutely certain.
Because of that, I told you every case has to be dealt with on an individual basis.
And let me just give, and this is the exact aviv moichabay shedoyeg shabayis yared kechavim mezalzel malilan einay tzarich l'shmayel aviv bezeh. So he says where the parent is afraid that the child will be harmed. So what the Shulchan Aruch does not discuss is where he's not worried about whether the child will be harmed, because then you enter into a whole shaila: is that even Kibbud Av? Because it's not Hanoah Shebegufay. Shulchan Aruch does not address a case where the parent needs the child to actually take care of them. Right? And
you're 100%. I agree with you 100%. But there's a difference. There's a difference in the gra on the spot over there in Siman Reish Mem. Quotes the Rashba in Yavamas, before quoting the Rashba in Yavamas, he says exactly what you're saying now, is that Kibbud Av aim is only mashkeu v'achelu. There are things which you're doing for Hanos Haguf. So the din of Kibbud Av aim will not be mechayev that there are a person in those kufers when they had the Gulf War in 1980, I think it was. I remember, and they were shooting missiles over Tel Aviv and Ramat Gan, and then the border of Bnei Brak, etc. I mean, many Americans left in 1955. Where the signing campaign, almost all the Americans left. They left because they were afraid. And in 1967, they opened up yeshivas in Europe the American Bochum that instead of going back to America, they should go temporarily to Europe until the situation will become a little safer over here. So when there was a matter of sakana, the parents had a tsar gadol, and even when the 1980s, when they had the Gulf War over here, that the people were coming to Eretz Yisroel to Rabbi Yosef every single day. And he was asking them that what should they do? Their parents have allowed. They're very worried. So you have to be chalik between the parents being doyik, and parents are always doyik for their children. They're always worried about the children. To a place where there's a sakana and they'll have tsar gadol. The din of causing tsar to your parents.
What did Rabbi Yashiv Paskin? I'm curious.
So again, instead of the parents would have tsar gadol. Tsar gadol is not a din of Kibbud Av. That goes into Hagdara of Maka Ish Avivas Imoy. So that means you're causing him a tsar by giving him a Maka. So okay,
yeah.
Yeah, so even though it has to be, the rice has to be a makas sheishbo chabala, ain't chabala, but again, it goes into that gather, and then they had it again. Each case had it on the individual basis. They're really matzar, they can't sleep at night. It's chedema. So then there was no need to go back. And a lot of people went back then, but it was just that the doyig, like the case of the Trumas Adesh and the case of the Makaber, which he quoted. So then Yashab say Tishmar, if a person feels his ruchnis is better in Eretz Yisroel, then it says clearly in Shulchan Aruch that you do not have to listen to your parents. And this is a very big cloud in the Shulchan Aruch, which gives us some insight as how to look at these situations.
But Reb Nochum, you're saying that there's two hagdaras, and I'm thinking maybe there are three. You're saying when it's tsar gadol, it comes to the pasuk of or makla of imay, right? Which is a klala in the Torah. You're saying when it rises.
It's not of a makla. No, it's not of a makla. Pasha. It's a makla ish of imay.
Well,
it's giving a makla. Of a makla is cursing him out. That's something else.
I understand, but okay. Either way, you're saying where it goes beyond. It goes beyond. It's tsar gadol. Now, but you're saying after that, if it's not tsar gadol, it's the mechaba in reish mem sivkat and chafei. Excuse me. I'm just differentiating that the mechaber in reish mem says if your parents are worried about you, stay and learn. Well, that's a question. That's what you say. The Gaon says is something where the parents do not have direct benefit. Is there even Kibbud Av on that? If your parent says, I want you to wear a shiny blue suit, because I enjoy that, it's a shaila whether that's Kibbud Av, but wear a ma'achaleu mashkeyu is absolutely Kibbud Av. So the Shulchan Aruch picks the middle road. It says, if somebody says, the parent says, look, I'm worried about you, so and Shulchan Aruch says, if your learning is better, that they're worried about you should not make you come back. But there are poskim who say, that, but if it's more than that. If the parent says, "I need you to be machiweni or feed me or take care of me," the Shulchan Aruch is not addressing that case, right?
You're 100% right. You're 100% right. And because of that, I told you that if it's a situation of that they really need them, there's no one else to do it. There's no one else to do it. It's not just that they feel lonely and they're getting older, etc., that they have no way of they're taking care of themselves. Then it may be that a person has to make a compromise even on his ruchnius, but this has to be decided only by a poisik, an authorized poisik who knows all the information which is involved, what the children, what their matzav is in Eretz Yisroel, what their ruchnis is in Eretz Yisroel, what their limud toiznes is, or where they're going to, etc., etc. So they have an individual case which this is necessary.
Okay, let me continue. Let's say the child is not learning. He went to Eretz Yisroel. He's in high tech there. He works in a bank. He's an accountant. So now already it's not for learning, but he feels, look, I want to be in Eretz Yisroel. The Diras Eretz Yisroel, Shakol Kedeget Kala Mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisroel. And the same question happened. Would you give that the same credo as you would to learning?
Definitely not. Definitely not. Definitely not. And more than that, many of these people who come to Yisroel and they're not in the Misgeret, they're not in the proper framework of being in the Dalar Amos of Halacha and being part of a yeshiva, part of a Kehillat, etc., they go back to America, they might do a lot better. So without the shaila of Kibbud Av aim, a person would ask me, I would tell him go back to America. And there's many people that in America they do a lot better because unfortunately in Eretz Yisroel we don't have things which they have in America. In America they have kilos, they have shuls, they have rabbanim, and people can feel associated. People feel associated part of a kilo, which gives them also a boost in ruchnius. And some of these people here they get lost in Eretz Yisroel because they're part of the workforce and they're not part of the learning force. So if a person's a choshev balabos, he's part of the workforce, but he still can be part of a framework of let's call it a yeshivish, havish framework. So Baruch Hashem, the Israel probably going to do better, but many of these people will do a lot worse. A bacher came to me yesterday. And his parents made Aliyah 7 years ago from a city in America. I don't want to mention the city. I don't mention they're living in one of these cities in the West Bank, and all his brothers went to the army, and he Baruch Hashem is learning in the Mir Yeshiva. And he came to me with a lot of problems how to deal with his parents. And when they were living in America, they went to more modern schools, but they went to schools. They were members of proper shul, and now they're living in this community in the West Bank, which he says that his brothers, his siblings, instead of going to yeshivas, and maybe even going to learn, to study in college and stuff, and they would have remained from. They went to the army, and none of them are from anymore.
So I want to just tell to what you're saying, Rav Nochum, is that Rav Henkin, when he writes about being buried, bringing people up to be buried in Eretz Yisroel, and Rabbi Yaakov wrote the same. Rabbi Yaakov spoke about it. He said a big part of the Messiah of Klal Yisrael, right, is Shema b'nei Musar avicha. He says when this whole thing, they send the mace over to Klal Yisrael, a parent. He said the kids don't go not by the yard sites, they can't go, not by a simcha, they don't go to invite their parents. He says it's a disruption of the whole musig of the Yiddish mishpacha. So when you say that when people move away to Eretz Yisroel, if they're coming for learning, it's one thing. But if they're coming to have the society of Eretz Yisroel, they're destroying one of the foundations. The first mitzvah that's given to Klal Yisrael is the concept of Ishu Mishpachtei, to sit together by a Suda. You don't have the father overseeing anymore. You don't have the siblings. You don't have the uncles. You don't have the aunts. And that creates...
There's no question about it. There's no question about it. In many cases, people coming to Eretz Yisroel, if they're not in the Madrega, which Eretz Yisroel requires, and Eretz Yisroel is Mechayev Moritz and Ramban in Bayan Sheistoim, they would do a lot better in America. I know many, many people who came to Eretz Yisroel, and they Americans, and they didn't want to sell the suit to what the level of Eretz Yisroel is, and therefore they send their children to schools which are compromised schools, and their children ended up in the army, and most of them not even from today. And in Eretz Yisroel, they would have gone to a regular yeshiva high school, and they would have continued, and they would have been part of a Kehillat, and they would have all likely they would have been from.
Rav Nochum, since we're talking about Kibbud Av, let me ask you another question. Rav Shlomo Zalman, I heard this from a few people, this story. I heard this from Dr. Pelkowitz, but I heard it from another person too. He said he was on his way to shul one morning, and there happened to be an ufruf in Shari Chesed, and he sees a father schlepping chairs, and next to him is his son, and his son is doing nothing. The chassan is walking along with him, and the father schlepping 6 folding chairs. So Shlomo Zalman turns to the son. He says, "Was helfst du nicht dein Tate, the alte Tate?" So the son looks at Rav Shlomo Zalman. He says, "What do you mean? I'm machmer. I don't use the erev." So Dr. Polkowitz said that Rav Shlomo Zalman started screaming at him. And I'm curious, what would...
I don't believe the story.
Well, I heard it from 2 different people. If you want, I could get Dr. Pelkowitz back on.
Okay, but again, they have to know what the situation. If there was no Erev, if there was an Erev, but he was machmed, he didn't want to use an Erev. In Shari Chesed, he probably did have a private Erev.
Shari Chesed had an Erev, right? Shari Chesed
Shari Chesed probably had an Erev, an internal Erev, which was a good Erev. So Mela Pasha, this guy's paving tzitkas. He didn't want to use an internal Erev, which was not the city Erev, which should not be used. So then there's kids that shake it, and someone should scream at him. However, it was a place where
Nochum, so let me ask you a question. So does somebody have a right to say, look, I want to adopt on myself particular chumris? A boy comes home, his family always eats gebrocks, right? They come from Ashkenaz, and he says, look, I decided I want to stop eating gebrocks. And he'll tell his mother, listen, I want you to make me separate kalim, separate this. Where do you say this Kibbud Av? And where do you say, look, I want to be machmir? Give us some guidelines.
There's clear Chuvas Rav Yosef and this Indian. It's printed in Svarim, also in his name. But the Hagdara which Rav Yosef gives, if something is a chumrah, which an accepted chumrah, which for the Mishnah Berurah, he'll say that it's to bring down 2 days. He'll say, Maisa, you should be Rachil, be Machmeh for the Chomedik Adeya. So according to Rav Yosef, that goes into the gather of Ish, Aviv, Imoy, Tiroi, V'Shapsoi, Tishmoru. So the son has the right. He has the right, Pashit, that not to compromise on his level. Now, if you ask him something about kidneys, tell this, or Gebrachs you're talking about, tell this kid he's a shoiter, that the Gebrachs is really not no ge'er bisman there. Because the way they make matzahs today, it's thin matzahs, and there's no shash. It's just a minig that people have that the years ago when the matzahs were thicker and they weren't baked as well as they are today, that there might have been a shash if some water comes in contact with it. But a person doesn't have such a minig in his family. He doesn't have to accept such a new minig. And the Shari Tshuva even says that if a person is machmen gebrachs, he might be machmen gebrachs, but he's pasha mavatal halach of simchas of oinig yontif. So this kid is a shoiter.
What would you say about the kid not carrying in Shari Chesed?
So again, I don't know what the situation, if there's an internal Erev in Shari Chesed, which was done with Askama from Shlomo Zalman, then this kid is watched them also. He's made chumas, which is not a chumah, which goes in the Agdor of Yosef, that if there's 2 days, the Mishnah Berurah says it should be machmer, he has the right to be machmer. So again, if that's the situation, that was the Erev, and Rav Shlomo Zalman himself would have carried the Erev, so the person is not only being Mavaz's father, he's being Mavaz of Shlomo Zalman also.
Okay.
Rav Shlomo Zalman told me personally, and again, because I had the schus of being by Rav Yosef for 25 years, and anything I needed, I went to Rav Yosef, but Shlomo Zalman told me personally that Ben Torah does not use the general Erev of the city. Unfortunately, in Eretz Yisroel, there were a lot of bombs on buses in a certain kufa when I was living in Eretz Yisroel. And Baruch Hashem, today I haven't heard in a long time that a bus was bombed. And children come to Eretz Yisroel, and the parents tell them that don't go on the bus. Any place you have to go with a taxi. Go with a taxi. So it's al pi halacha. You don't be choishesh, even though unfortunately there were different kufas that there were a lot of bombs and buses, but it was a miut loy matzui. And they came and they asked Rav Yosef the shaila. I asked the shaila to Rav Yosef, and the shlichus Rav Yosef said, if your parents don't know about it, that you're going on the bus, you don't have to worry about it. But it doesn't go in the din of, it doesn't, so the parents will mitzvah you. They'll mitzvah you not to go on a bus. So as long as you're not mitzvah them, they don't know about it. So you can go on the bus if you want.
But if they would find out about it and they would be mitzvah, it would be asa.
If they were no, not because they were mitzvah. So that goes into the Rash. So according to the Rashba, there's no Kibbud Av, because according to Rashba, it's not machelu mashkeu.
Yeah, but
if they would have emes
the Rashba is a machlekes rishonim, right?
I know, but that's why I said halacha we passing like the Rashba.
And there are other paiskim who don't know paskin like the Rashba.
Okay, but halacha the accept
the Hashulchan is this topic, whether like the Rashba, so it becomes a topic.
Okay, but the accept the psak. except the psak, and this is the psak which Rabbi Yosef followed also, is that we go according to the Rashba. So over here there was a different situation. Here's a situation, they made the children promise, the parents made the children promise you will not go on a bus, only in a taxi. So they made them promise. Well, they also said also, if they don't know about it, you don't have to keep the promise. See, it was more serious because they promised them. They says, listen, you're going to Israel, promise you. So they shook their heads and they didn't want to be sorry the parents by saying not to promising, but the promise was no question about it. It was nidre oinsin. It was because the parents told them you have to do so and so. They don't want to go fight with the parents, and Rabbi Yosef said they don't have to. What's name? It's not mechayev. Doesn't obligate you.
Well, Nochum, it's always an honor to have you on with us. It's a joy and an honor.
And it's always a pleasure, Pasha, to speak with you. You get me to think a little, and you always ma'oira very important issues. And again, the purpose of me speaking was, or at least that's what I thought was only to give some general guidelines. But the main message I want to give over, that whenever there's a shiloh, sometimes these are very serious shilohs, sometimes these shilohs. Something Shiloh's and Mamashitz is talking about in the Foshis of no one's going to take care of the parents properly. It's a Mekar of the Misa Chas v'Shalom. But the general way I want to put out and emphasize this: whenever there's a Shiloh, an authorized Rav has to be asked and discussed, and he has to know all the situations, all the different information involved, and then he can give an authorized psak.
Nochum, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, and it's always a pleasure to speak to you.
Bye-bye. We have the honor of having with us on the phone Dr. Benzion Sortotzkin, who's a clinical psychologist practicing out of Flatbush. He's a Talmud of Telz, where his father was a Rabbi, his grandfather was the Lutzker Rav Zalman Sortotzkin, the Chaber of Aznayim Lamishpat, Aznayim L'Torah. He's a musmach of Eretz Yisroel, and he's also a doctor of psychology, so he arkeve trei he wears two hats. Welcome, Dr. Sortotzkin.
Hello, good to be here.
I'm going to call you Rabbi Dr. Sortotzkin, because where I come from,
yes.
Where I come from, the rabbi is more chashuv. It's both chashuv, but the rabbi is more, they say over the Brisker Rav once said, it says by light, v'anoshim asher ba'delas hiku b'sanverim.
Right.
When they were looking for light, they got blind. They looked for the door. So the Brisker Rav said, the only joke I ever heard from the Brisker Rav, who does not seem like he had a very big sense of humor, he said, he says, as a mensch wird blind, when a person becomes blind, sucht a doctor, sucht nicht the tier. Why were they looking for the door? So the Brisker Rav said, Rashi says, Oisei hayoy minu loit shoifet aleim. He became the chief rabbi. He says, as given the chief rabbi is mistam as a given rabbi doctor. He was the chief rabbi because the first rabbis of Israel. He was probably rabbi doctor. The Herzog was rabbi doctor. Okay.
Right.
So Dr. Sortotzkin, you deal with a lot of practice and a family practice, and one of the issues you have, I'm sure, is relationships, parents and children.
Sure.
What happens to parents when a child who, assuming they had a good relationship, picks themselves up and goes to an out-of-town koil? They have an opportunity. Phoenix opened up a koil. They go to Phoenix. They're going to come back every year, Pesach. They move away, and that's it. The parents see them Pesach. The Einiklach grow up barely knowing a parent. Give us some both from a relationship point of view, what that does to the relationship. What does that do to the parents? What does you, as both a musmach of Rav Ruderman, see that as far as, the issue of Kibbud Av? Give us a little bit of background on this.
You talk about a married person, a married son?
A married son,
Yes. First, let me tell you something about somebody who's not married, a single fellow. That somebody I know, once his son was going to learn, his oldest son was going to Eretz Yisroel to learn. Kederach, like most Bachrim do today. So he told me that somebody told him that he shouldn't tell his son that he's going to miss him, because then his son will feel guilty. So I told him, I think that's incorrect. You should tell him you're going to miss him, because if you don't miss him, and he shouldn't feel guilty because he's not doing anything wrong. Okay, so same thing. It really depends where the motivation comes from. In other words, I imagine that most parents, sometimes Dafna when the relationship isn't so good, would prefer their children to live around them. and the children usually may, Dafka, because the relationship isn't so good, maybe prefer not to live around them. So I'm a monashach. If the relationship is good and your child wants to move away, so why would you tell them not to? You should definitely feel, it'll be normal to feel sad and wish him to be around, but if it makes sense for him to go, he can learn more years there because the cost of living is not so high. So unless the parents have, especially if they're elderly and they can't really manage on their own, but assuming that they could, then it's l'chayra, and I guess the young man should discuss it with his Rabbi, to see if in fact this is the best idea for him. If it is, why would the parents want to stand in their way?
Well, so I'll tell you what inspired me. Somebody sent me an article in Ami magazine last week, and the article was about somebody who moved away to Eretz Yisroel, and I don't believe there were any names in the article, so I'm not, I'm not being mavaz anybody when I write this. And they said, them and their two siblings moved to Eretz Yisroel, and they said, we come back every year Pesach, and they say, well, it's been a year, and we noticed our father's older, and he fell. And said, come to Eretz Yisroel, Abba, but he can't because he's probably supporting them, by the way.
Right.
And now the mother is fell and this, and they're just getting older and more exhausted, and they don't see. So they decided they're going to make a Mesiras Nefesh, and with 11 children, I think it said, they're moving back to America. And my feeling was like, wow, like why are you there in the first place? Like everybody abandoned the parents? If you would ask your average, guy this question, he would say, like, what kind of kid are you? So aren't we supposed to be at a higher level? The whole concept of the Torah is we should be at a, I was speaking to a Fry Yid asked me, he said, what do we need? What do you need the Torah for? He said, we have American law, which covers so many issues. I said, American law. You're not allowed to hurt somebody. If you attack them, you can go to jail, right? I said, let's say you speak hurtfully of them. Is there anything wrong? I said, we have a concept of Einos Tvarim, right? Sure. I said, if you polish the apples in front of your store, there's nothing wrong with it. The Shulchan Aruch says that's Genevas Das. Right? I said, so we are supposed to be at a higher level. When you ask Mamish, a Barbe Rav, a simple guy, 3 kids, moved to Eretz Yisroel, they abandoned their parents, it sounds like a Himmelgeschrei. And yet by us we say, no, go. Do you feel that there's a conflict here?
First of all, with all due respect, I'm not sure, I don't think we have much to learn from them about having a relationship within the family. Many of them, for much less of a reason than going to Eretz Yisroel, are not near their parents. So, but it's still a good question. So again, and I'm not just. By the way, I'm more of the Chusa. I'm not sure if they're moving back with 11 kids, if they're going to be a big help to their parents.
And I would say something else. I would say at that point, the damage that they can do to their kids. It can be so incremental, right?
Which damage? I missed that. The damage
when you move back with 11 kids, that means you're pulling kids out of elementary school and high school. You're displacing them to a foreign language for the most part, 100%. To a different. You could be killing 11 kids now for your parents. So it's like you a meisiv krumkeit on top of krumkeit, possibly, right?
I think Rabbi Bulmash, I think he was a big encourager. He used to encourage people to move to Eretz Yisroel. And he used to say, go either when you're very young or when you're retired, because otherwise it's too risky for the children when they're older. So that's another point. But to get back to your main point, so if the parents, mamash, need your help, and the reason you're going to Eretz Yisroel because you think you'll steig more in learning, that's mamash, you have to ask a shaila. This is a pasha halachadik shaila, where you have to balance the chiyuv of Kibbud Av and against your ability to steig more in learning them. This has been asked over the generations, many times from Gedolei Yisrael. Or for Parnasa, if a person needs even to move from Eretz Yisrael to America for Parnasa and his parents need him. But I think there's a different question here where the parents, let's say, if they mamish need you, they're not managing, they're elderly, they can't manage, and there's no other aids. So I think you have to ask a shaila. But I think there's another situation that comes about frequently where it's really more of a control issue. When in general, again, I'm not saying this is common, but it sometimes happens where the parents in general feel that they have a right to control their children, and because it's more geschmack for them to have their children around them, they get upset when they move out of town, even if it might make more sense for the child to do that.
Dr. Sortotzkin,
Sure.
respectfully, do you think that a parent who has 3 children who have all moved out of town, you think it's a control issue that they want a child there?
No. I didn't say the fact that they want it is not a control issue. It's perfectly normal. It would be very sad if they didn't want. So I'm sorry if I made that impression. I was trying to say that let's say all 3 of them, let's say it would be for parnasa reasons. Let's say the children happen to be that none of them can make parnasa here, and they were only able to make parnasa out of town. So how should the parents deal with that?
I think it's a minor tragedy for the parents. I mean, they become basically, shakula. They lost their children for 95% of the time, right? And it's a tragedy. So the question is, do we take the child's desire to learn in a kollel or a better Rebbe? Do we take that to the level of where you're basically going to go hungry? You're not going to have parnasa. Like these are all contextual questions.
Sure.
Right, but it's clearly a tragedy. A person who has 3 kids who moved away or far, and they're all over, and they get together, maybe Pesach. Yeah, it's a tragedy for the parents.
I really don't know. The ones who are close to their children, the ones who have a good relationship, usually keep in touch. They speak on the phone. They do Skype. The kids usually come more frequently, maybe than or they able to go to the children. In today's modern traveling, I don't know if that happens that frequently. That somebody, all their children leave. Sometimes they get upset even if one child leaves. I've seen situations like that. They want everyone to be here, and it's very upsetting to them if even one leaves. I would agree with you. If it happened that somebody had a number of children, every single one of them moved out of town, it would be very difficult for the parents. But many parents, you see today, many parents moved to Lakewood. All their children moved to Lakewood because they couldn't afford housing in New York, let's say, or they were learning in yeshiva there for whatever other reason. And now they're already established that the kids are in school. It would be very hard for them, even if they left Kehillat and they went to work, it would be very hard for them to change and move here. So the parents, out of consideration and understanding that it's so much easier and it'll be very difficult for the children to leave. So if they're able to and they're retired or whatever, and then they move to Lakewood. I think that's very considerate. It's very kolakavot to the parents that they're considerate of the child's needs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So tell me, the last time we had you on, you spoke about how abusive parents, and we spoke about, I believe it was the Marshal in Reish Maalot or Reish Beit that talks about how an abusive parent, we don't have to be mechabed at our cost.
Yes, and Yam Shlomo,
yeah.
Right, Marshal,
What would you tell us a little about? Do you have other cases where you feel that children are abusive of their requirements? Can you talk a little bit about that, the other side of this?
I mean, if they fall short and they neglect their parents' needs. Yes, I think you would understand that usually, b'derech klal, I'm sure that happens, and obviously there's all kinds of Yeshurun involved there, and certainly being mevatel an asay and many leisa says there too. It's more likely to happen when the parents fall short that the child will fall short. Many years ago, I used to do consulting in nursing homes, so I dealt with a lot of elderly people with grown children. I would find that, sometimes it would be an elderly parent, let's say a mother, who's in the nursing home, and children hardly ever come. And the nurses would often complain bitterly and, be very critical of why these children hardly ever come to visit their mother. I would point out to them the b'derech klal had happened when it was a resident that they themselves had a hard time getting along with. It was a difficult resident. It was more likely to happen then. And when those children did come to visit, let's say the son came to visit, the mother would spend most of the time complaining bitterly why it doesn't come more frequently. And the mothers who weren't like that and were very appreciative whenever the child had time to come and didn't complain that why didn't he come more often, the children came more often. So it very often happens that, sometimes people move out of town, even if it's not officially the reason. They're officially moving to learn or to make parnasa, but very often they're trying to avoid getting into conflict with the parents. It's like the Gemara talks about Ravasi, right? He moved to Eretz Yisroel in order not to be around his mother, who sounded like she was kind of disturbed. So he figured instead of staying around and getting into arguments with her, he moved to Eretz Yisroel. That's sometimes the right thing to do. The Maskonim came to Shlomo Zalman and said to him that there was a mother, I think she had been divorced, a very bitter lady. She was being very abusive of her young daughter. and they tried intervening, nothing helped. So Hashem asked if she has any relatives in America, and she said that she has an uncle and aunt in New York. He said, send her there. When the mother heard about it, she got very angry, and she said she's going to commit suicide if they take the daughter away. So the Rav Shem Zalman said that that's her choice. You can't ask the child to live there. So it's that if the mother, that's what she wants to do, that's her choice. But those are obviously extreme situations. But I think b'derech klal, when a parent when there's a good relationship, the child will not leave just without any machshav at all, what it does to the parent. They'll usually think about, are there other children who live in the area? Could their parents manage? Could they come visit frequently? Maybe the parents can come to them, or they can come to the parents to visit. They speak to their Rabbi and try to weigh the two things. So I think usually when you see a tremendous hesitancy or resistance on the part of the child to be considerate of the parents' feelings, it's usually indicative of a chasarn in the relationship. I saw in the Sefer Binas Hamidus from Rav Yitzchak Lawrence. He quotes Rav Aaron Leib Steinman once about parents who mix into their married children's life. And he writes there that it's totally not permissible to do that. He says, Ein lehem litarev. Mas sheyesh b'neihem, between the couple, also lehem litarev. It's also for them to get involved. Haim hu balabais alav, is the father of balabais of the child. Yesh mishu balabais al hasheni, ein af echad. And he brings a similar story from Chaim Brisker. He brings from Moshe Shapiro. There was once a mother who was causing Shalom Bayis problems whenever she came to the house. And Moshe Shapiro said, he said, "B'mikra kazeh asur le'afshir lechamais shum hitarvut bebeis hatzayir." She shouldn't allow her have any mixing in at all into the family. And if nothing else they can do, they should tell her she's not allowed to come to the house. Of course, he says she should be misyayitz with a talmid chacham she'eina negea b'davar. Very important.
I mean, this is already halachically the Taz discusses in-laws who are mitzayer, and they say the daughter-in-law and the Haber has a right to say, I will not go to them anymore.
Yeah.
There's a story recently with Reb Chaim Kanievsky, where a son-in-law came to him and he said, we wanted to go for my mother-in-law for Yom Tif, and she said, no, weil man mischt sich nicht. What should I do? So Reb Chaim Kanievsky said, if the whole year he mischt sich nicht eichet, so then she has a right to say, don't come Pesach. But if a ganze Jahr mischt sich sie, and Punkt Pesach mischt sich sie nicht, he says she's wrong.
Very.
So you're saying in your clinical experience, for the most part, it's very interesting that children would want to be mechabed, is the natural inclination of children to be mechabed their parents in cases where the parents had a good relationship, and obviously with exception, but for the most part, when kids are not mechabed their parents, it's because the parents have injured that relationship. That's been your experience.
That's been my experience.
Sort of kamayim panim al panim.
Now, of course, needless to say, there could be external factors that make the parent's job much harder, so much more challenging. So, for instance, if a child has a serious learning disability, or even a serious medical problem, it's obviously much more difficult to be a good parent. And some, of course, parents who have, very large families, and there might be some issues with some of them, whatever. There could be many, or lack of parnasa, of course. I saw brought down from, I think it was the Brisker Rav. Somebody asked him why in the year of the establishment of Israel in 1948, during that tkufa, there were probably many more people going off the derech than there are in our times. It was Lam Shema Geifa. Although it was the Chazanish, I'm sorry, it was the Chazanish. The Chazanish said that it was because there was such the parnasa, the economy matzav there, the poverty was like not to be believed. It was probably worse than in America during the Great Depression. And that caused tremendous stress in families and a lack of shalom bayis, and that caused the kids to go off the derech. So again, one certainly can't blame the parents, but it was a fact. The fact is there was no shalom bayis, so that's the result. So I think that's the derech. Now, is a chach there could be somebody who did have a good relationship and push it out for chasarn and midas. He's not even thinking about what's going to mean to his parents if he moves. I'm sure such a thing is possible, and certainly it would be correct. Maybe for the parents to speak to the boy's, the bacher, the young man's Rabbi as Rosh Yeshiva. If such a situation happens, but it's not. There was somebody once told me a story that he had a very wealthy friend who lives, I think, in Muncie, and all his children went to Lakewood to learn. The person who told me the story told me the father was a controlling person, and he told his children who were they were married that he's only going to buy them if they live near him. He'll buy them a house, each one, and if he insists on living in Lakewood, then he'll only pay for the rent. He won't buy them houses. So I don't know if a parent, what do you gain out of it? What does the parent gain out of it if he's trying to force closeness, compel closeness? It's like, when you mun covet, it doesn't really work very well.
And it's also when, there's something I've seen parents by a kid's simcha, by a mitzvah, where the parent speaks the whole time and dominates. And isn't there a concept like let your child shine?
Yes, most definitely.
And I'll start to a word, by Tetzaveh, it says, Moshe Rabbeinu's name is not in Tetzaveh.
Right.
So the Baal HaTurim says, because he said, Mecheni no misifruch asher kasaf, they erased me from your book, and when he was Moshe Nefesh for Klal Yisrael.
Yeah.
And it was Niskayim in Tetzaveh.
Yeah.
So the obvious question is, when he said Mecheni no misifruch, he was putting his life on the line because of his love for Klal Yisrael. Rabbi Shalom said, I want to erase them and I will make you, the whole nation will come from you. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, you erase them, erase me. I die before them. So what's his award? He says, Mechenina. He's punished for that.
100%,
So I heard once from Rabbi Schwartzman, he said a beautiful shot. He said, when is Klal Yisrael mamish b'miluay? In which parsha would you say Klal Yisrael is its absolute highest matziv? Well, before Kabbalah Satira. They didn't have the Torah yet. Like now, between Pesach and Shavuos, it's Klal Yisrael before Torah. So Yisra is when they got it, right?
Yeah.
Kisisa is the Egel when it goes downhill.
Yeah.
But Yisra, they still didn't have the Mishkan yet, and the Ramban writes, Klal Yisrael's at Miluya is when they had the Mishkan. They returned to Maalot, Avosim, etc. So he says, when is Klal Yisrael mamish at the peak? In Tetzaveh. It's right before the Egel, they're at the peak. He says, it's not a punishment to Moshe, it's a reward. He says a great leader, a great father says, when you're at your shining moment, I'm going to disappear.
Wow.
So you could shine. You shine on your own. I don't want to share the limelight with you. You just have the whole limelight. He says that's what a great parent does, right?
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? Moshe Rabbeinu stepped aside. So I think a great parent, you're saying, is not controlling, but recognize kids who live in their parents' shadow. So let me ask you a question as a doctor, a clinical psychologist, a relationship expert. Can parents repair relationships if they have not treated the kids, maybe they feel they were recalcitrant during childhood? Or is it repairable, and have you seen it repaired?
I for sure. The Rebbeinu Shem built into the person that he has a tremendous chukah to be close to his parents. I think it's part of in our DNA. And therefore, even if things were not good, even if they were very bad, kimat always, it's shaykh to repair it. The condition that's necessary, often when somebody had serious issues with his parents, maybe they were, let's say, in those situations, hopefully not too frequent, when parents are abusive, let's say. Let's say it's a type of behavior, the kuli amiloi pligi, it will be considered abusive. So the child is very angry and he's distant from the parents. So sometimes, let's say the child's already older. He's already a young man. He's 25, and somebody will say to him, "So how come you never call your parents?" And he said, "Because they mistreated me, etc." So somebody said, "But that was a long time ago. You got to put the past behind you." There's often a criticism people have of children, of adult children. Why don't you just put the past behind you? Why are you living in the past? So if you think about it, where do we see in Yiddishkeit how to deal with trauma? What's the mahalach is avelis, right? Never somebody passes away, so the krivim are in avelis. How do you get past that trauma? Do you just say put it behind you? You do want to put it behind you because you have gzera al mesh nishtakach min alev. But how do you get there? For 7 days, you're not allowed to be mesiach das. There's a tremendous amount of validation of the loss. The whole neighborhood comes. All the people from work come, from the country, from the bungalow colony. Anybody you went to yeshiva with. The ganze Welt comes, and they validate the fact that you had a terrible loss. That allows you to put it behind you. So if somebody was traumatized in his family, there's usually no validation. The parents deny that it happened. Other people either don't know that it happened or don't want to say that it happened. So everybody's telling him to put it behind them when they don't even acknowledge that it happened. How can you put something that didn't happen behind you if it didn't happen? So when a parent acknowledges it, and I've seen it happen, when parents, it's...
So how does a parent acknowledge it? Walk me through. My kid,
yes.
I did X, Y, and Z, and I was not respectful.
Yes.
I was maybe narcissistic.
Yes.
I didn't understand the child's needs.
Yes.
I was a new parent. I didn't take a parenting course, which unfortunately they don't give in any school that I know of. And I learned how to be a barber on my kid's head of hair. And now I'm older, and I realize I made real mistakes. How do I fix that?
Before I answer that, you said you never took the course. Actually, courses are not always so helpful, because the best course is if your parents treated you in a loving, respectful way. Then you don't need to take the course. And if they didn't, the course doesn't help that much, because very often the person doesn't realize that he's just repeating what he grew up with. So that's the one thing. But let me
start to I'm a chazal to what you're saying.
Sure.
Cain names his son Chanoch.
Right.
Miloshin Chinuch.
Right.
So which is wonderful. The first child, his first child, you have to be mechanech your child.
Yeah.
So the question that Rabbi asks is, why didn't Adam name his child Chanoch? I have to be mechanech my child. It's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they say because how are you mechanech a child? You think, look, when I was 10, this is how I did, and this is how I ended up in this. So I'm going to be mechanech my son. I was a teenager. I know what teenagers go through. Dating, oh, what a nightmare that was. He says, Adam had no childhood. He couldn't name his kid Chanoch. Cain was the first son with a childhood. He could name his kid Chanoch.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah. So to answer your question, how you repair it. The first thing is you acknowledge that it happened. You say b'peh malei, and it's very hard for any parent to do. In fact, incidentally, the more you realize it, the more painful it is to say it. The more you realize what you did and the effect it had. Like, in the old days, they used to think feeding your child fattening food was the best thing you could do for him. That's how you showed your child love. So imagine also you discover that because of you, he has 250 cholesterol, So it's painful. Especially when you didn't do it for lishma. But so let's say like this. Let's say the first thing you do is you acknowledge it. You tell your child that, listen, I realize how painful. I realize where your issues come from. I realize why you're so angry. I hurt you a lot. I certainly didn't do meaningfully. That wasn't what I was trying to do, but I didn't realize. I didn't know. And I think Shlomo Hyman said that a proper asking of Bechila should make the person who is asking turn red and sweaty, thinking how he hurt the person. That's a proper way of asking for Bechila. So if a parent really acknowledges v'tamole, not the type of apologies that politicians do. If somebody was hurt, I apologize. I think recently there was a politician that said something, I don't remember, it was something racist or anti-Semitic, really, above and beyond. And when he was called on it, he said, if anybody's hurt, I apologize. As if it's shaykh, as if it's the person's problem that he was hurt. So if you do make a sincere apology, or another example of that would be, recently, I sent somebody with his parents to a family therapist, sit together, try to work out the relationship. And the child the young man, he was, I think, a teenager, about 17. He had a lot of complaints. And the father response was, I don't know what you're talking about. Nothing. I never did anything like that, or you're exaggerating. But if I did anything like that, I'm sorry. So the therapist told the father, that doesn't sound like a very sincere apology.
No, it doesn't.
So he answered. The father answered, no, not true. I have no idea what I'm apologizing for, but it's 100% sincere. Okay, so I'm saying if you make a sincere apology, and the second point is that you have to realize to repair a relationship is a process. It doesn't happen overnight.
Because let me just interject, Dr. Sortotzkin.
Sure.
How do you apologize in a moment for what could have been 5, 10, 15, or 20 years of misunderstanding and abuse?
That's why it's a process. Goofa for that reason.
Yeah, I'm saying the Germans apologized. I mean, not only does it need a sincere apology, but you're saying it may need repeated apologies.
I think that's the reason. I once had this machshava. The reason why Chazal say you have to ask mechila 3 times, because the way you show you're sincere, you don't get baleidik that the person didn't accept your mechila the first time. Do you understand? There's a person once who did something awful to his wife, something beyond. And she, to her credit, was willing to try to repair the relationship. They're going to go to marriage counseling, but the man told me, the husband told me, I'd have to crawl for many years to make up for what I did. So I told him, if you understand that, there's a chance you might be able to repair the relationship. You have stories of abusive husbands who abuse their wives, and then they regret it because when they come to their senses, when they get over their anger or baleitikait, and they buy their wife a beautiful gift and a flower, and she's still angry. She's still braiges, and they get mad. Now they get mad at the wife. I said I'm sorry, and I bought you roses. That's the evidence of the insincerity. So I think if I care, one of the ways, and I've seen many parents do that to their credit, that when they realize what they did, usually they themselves, parents weren't so sensitive to them, so they didn't realize it. So they'll tell this to the child, and they don't all of a sudden try to be chummy with their child. That's what often happens. I said I'm sorry, and I'm trying to make it up, so let's go to the ball game together. You need to give the person time and to slowly to rebuild the relationship. You ask him, so how are you doing today? And if he doesn't give you such a big answer, don't get baleidik. You see him tomorrow, and don't ask him the first day, let's go out to eat dinner. So when you're sensitive to what you did and how it affected him, and you're willing to be patient and show your sincerity by understanding that after you hurt somebody, you can't expect it to be, even a one-time event. If somebody said something very, very nasty in public to his friend, and friend is very angry, and the person sincerely apologizes, does he call him the next day as if it's 3 weeks ago and nothing happened?
So give me an example of a case that you dealt with where somebody said something very hurtful and they apologized and it worked.
Okay, something comes to mind. Many years ago, I treated a lady who came for something completely different. She had other issues, but Agavurcha came up with how she was dealing with her children. She had 2 children. That was Negea. That she was very harsh with them. So I pointed out.
Define harsh.
Being always critical. Nothing they did was right. Raising your voice at them. It wasn't. I wouldn't say it reached the level of being abusive, but it was harsh. I know this is such a good mashal, but let me just tell you the story anyways. I think it's interesting. Then I'll try to give one that's more to addresses your question. So I pointed out to her that she was complaining that they don't listen and they don't tell her what's going on in their life, and I made the connection. The way you treat them doesn't encourage them to be open with you or to have a close relationship with you. And she was makabel, and she really, so for the next few months, maybe 2-3 months, every time she came, she would tell me, my tongue is black and blue. I'm always biting my tongue. I'm catching myself saying something harsh, and I'm biting my tongue. Okay. And then afterwards we dropped it, and we went speaking about whatever other things she came for. And a few months later, I remembered the conversation, and I brought it up to her, and I said, you haven't talked about your tongue being black and blue anymore, recently. So she says, it's not black and blue. I don't even want to say those things anymore. It became so obvious to her that being nicer to them and more thoughtful of their feelings changed the whole situation. But you wanted to know in a situation where somebody was more abusive and more to the level of abuse. Unfortunately, it's more common the other way that they don't come around. But there definitely has been. Yeah, I can think of one that comes to mind. And I saw from Rav Chaim Friedlander that the purpose of punishment and chinuch is not to take revenge on the kid, and not necessarily even to punish him for what he did or to prevent the next time. It's a child should see from your punishment how egregious his act was. So if he did something minor, you give him a minor reprimand, and if he did something major, you do something more major. It's a more strong reprimand. Through your chinuch, Rav Chaim Friedlander says, from your reaction, he understands how bad his action was. But when parents are very critical, and certainly if they're abusive, the child doesn't get this midas hamishkal. He's not able to weigh, and that mamish messes with a person's brain. and his relationships with other people, and even in marriage. So let's say his wife is upset about something he did. Let's say not even a minor thing. His wife asked him to buy stamps in the post office, and he comes home. His wife said, "Where's the stamps?" He goes, "Oh, I forgot." His wife says, "Oh, shucks, I really needed it." He's going to react as if she yelled at him.
And for the most part, would you say when parents try to fix these things, they are repaired, like children are receptive to it?
If they're patient. Unfortunately, some of them, they get angry if the child doesn't accept it right away. I try. Some parent will tell me, for the last 2 weeks I've been nice to him and he's still angry. I said the problem developed over, 18 years. It's not going to go over away in 2 weeks. You have to be patient, and the way you show him that you understand what went wrong and how much you hurt him is by being patient. That's good for the way you prove it.
Well, Dr. Sortotzkin, Rabbi Dr. Sortotzkin, it's always an honor and a pleasure having you on with us.
It's a pleasure speaking to you, too. Kol tov.
Kol tov, bye-bye. We have the honor of having with us on the phone from Eretz Yisroel, Rav Yaakov Haber. He's a Talmud of Brisk. He learned by Rabbi Soloveitchik, Zichron. He's originally from Buffalo, so they recruited him from Buffalo to be sort of, the Rav of Buffalo after he learned in Brisk. After that, he became the Rosh Koil in the Lakewood Koil in Melbourne, Australia for 6 years. He was also the director of came back to America, was the director of Chinuch for the OU. While the Shabbosim, he was a Rav here in Monsey in Rabbi Weinshul. He then decided to make Aliyah to Eretz Yisroel, where he became a Rav in Ramat, Beit Shemesh, and Kehillat, Shivtei, Yeshurun, which is called by Americans KSY, a very large shul. It has 220 families, hundreds of people there on Shabbos. It's an honor to have you with us, Rabbi Yaakov.
Thank you very, very much, and thank you for thinking of me. I must mention, even before we begin, that thank you for the beautiful bio. Let's not forget my main Rabbi, Rav Scheinberg, because I really ask myself on a regular basis, what would he say? And that's pretty much how we run our life and how we run the Kehillat here in Ramat Beit Shemesh.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. You're a Rav. KSY is mostly Olim. And a guy calls you and he says, "Listen, Rabbi Haber, I live in America. I want to come up to Eretz Yisroel to do Aliyah. I love Eretz Yisroel. My parents really want me to stay in America. They want to see me. They want to see the Einiklach. What do you tell this? How would you paskin?"
Well, first of all, before we get to the psak, I just want to say that I get these calls during the season, which is when people are thinking about where to send their kids to school the next year, probably once or twice a day.
Once or
twice a day in season. So
you're the expert. I called the right place.
Well, besides for being the expert, I just want to show you how true your question is, because this is apparently Aliyah is on the mind. If I'm just a small representative of the callers, it must be on the mind of hundreds, if not thousands, of people. And very often, the question is that my parents are against it. That would be very young people. But more often, the question that people have is, what's going to be with my kids? The second question is, which is a good question, the second question is, what's going to be with my parnasa? The third question is, I'm talking to you, but you're not really an Israeli. Maybe, if we're thinking about this, should we be integrating into real Israeli, whatever that means, real Israeli society? Maybe they want to move on to some kibbutz, or they want to move into, more in the Haredi, yeshivish world, but Israeli. So these are the kind of questions that people ask, and they call generally with a lot of fear and a lot of trepidation, and every once in a while, leaving my family, my parents, my brother, and my sister, how are we going to work that out? And what's interesting, the top amongst the fears is are my kids going to all go off the derech? Off the derech, OTD. That's the big thing. Apparently, there's a shame that moving to Israel is dangerous for kids. Surprisingly, by the way, not that many people are worried about the security situation, not worried about the safety. I don't hear that too much. I'm not worried about being, blown up by terrorists. So that's good, but they are worried about chinuch. I would say that's got to be the main question that people ask. And on that, I tend to paskin, or at least opine as to what I think they should be thinking and what they should be doing.
Well, let's go back to the beginning. This week is, Ish Aviv Imoy Tiro Veshabsai Tishmoyer, right? So this is the week to speak about Kibbud Av, at least in America. What would you opine? The person says, I'm leaving my parents, and they're opposed to it. What do you say?
I don't think that Kibbud. I'm just a touch uncomfortable giving some kind of a Psychologist because, of course, every case is different. But generally speaking, Kibbud Av is Mishalav and not Mishal Ben. And I know that all of us, me, you, all of us, have to run our family in the way that it's correct to run our family. We have to give our kids the chinuch that we think is correct, and we have to live in the environment that we think is correct. And I don't know if, other than the emotional part of it, if halachically it's even a tzad to stay in the United States, unless, of course, they really need your help.
But let me push back. The Yaakov Avinu was nenash, Chazal say, because for the 14 years that he stayed by Lavan, that he should have come back, right? Against his father.
No, not right.
That he wouldn't be Makai. That he couldn't be Makai. He said for the 14 years that he was in Shemeshwith, he was in nenash, because Talmud Torah, like the Shulchan Aruch says in Reish Mem, is Doiche Kibbud Av, right? But the 14 years he was just going there for the Zeliarbes Reishana B'Shtei B'nai Secha. For that he was nenash, right? It's Chazal, it's indisputable, right?
I think it is disputable.
Okay.
Nenash, what he was worried about is that he didn't have the schus of Kibbud Av, not that he was getting an onesh, whereas Esav had the schus of Kibbud Av.
But the Lashon Chazal is that he was nenash.
We got to look at that.
Okay.
But I'm not so sure. I know there's a Tanchuma that says that schus and Rashi is not clear. But leave the diuk and we'll talk on learning maybe at a different time. Obviously Kibbud Av is a fantastic schus, but that doesn't mean I don't think that anybody would say that Kibbud Av means that to do what your parents want. I might be creating a revolution here. I think Kibbud Av is to when your parents want you to go do it, become a doctor or a lawyer or learn in kollel. I don't think there's a Kibbud Av there. You have to do what you have to do. Kibbud Av maybe when you're milifneihem, when you're right in front of them, you're not allowed to be soiser divrayim. That might be. Kibbud Av is if they need shimush. If they need me to take care of them.
If you're in Eretz Yisroel, you're not going to be able to be mishamish them.
Okay, so the first question I would ask the people calling is, do your parents need you, or are they just going to miss you?
Okay.
I have
and
kids.
Let's grade it. Let's say they would need you. Let's break it down into brisk-wise into parcels. Let's say they say we need you.
If they need you, you have a big shiloh whether you're allowed to go. If your parents need you, unless you're going to have a hefsid mammon, probably have to stay. But need is a big word. It can't be a perceived need. It can't be just a Jewish mother saying that I'm okay, I'll sit in the dark if you're not here. We're talking need is need, shimush. Otherwise, the halacha is very clear. You tend to your own spiritual and, for that matter, physical needs. So need, and you could also be makayim the need through with money or with some other way. There's shluchim. If they need, what do they need? They need somebody to go to the grocery store, so order it online and get it to them. So I don't buy the Kibbud Av line too much, unless your father, your mother really needs you. And look, I mean, I'm one that I brought my father to Eretz Yisroel because he needed me, and he was old. He was in his late 80s, and he moved into our home. And my wife and I, mostly my wife, took care of him when we were Mishamish of Day. And if we found a way to do what we wanted to do with our children, to do what we wanted to do with our own lives, and what we wanted to do for Klal Yisrael. So it can only be a small part, or a part, of the big cheshbon. The big cheshbon has to be what's right for my family, and what's right by the Ribono Shel Olam.
So let's talk about that, okay? Because and I'm surmising, what the Shulchan Aruch says, if you want to marry a particular woman, your parents don't have a right to tell you not to marry that woman, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. At the end of this, the Reishmem, right? But, I mean, we could almost obliterate Kibbud Av if we say lead your own life without any cheshbon of your parents. And we can, for that matter, we can abandon our parents. You're saying for Dvar Mitzvah, we can go skiing all year, right? I mean, it's one of the Aseres HaDibros to really define it as, do they really need you? I mean, they could use Uber to bring them eats. They could hire an aide. I mean, what's left of Kibbud Av once you say everything's doable by somebody else? And I'll tell you an interesting thing. If you make a in Kibbud Av it says, Kabed es avicha v'esimecha l'man yarichon yamecha. So some of the Mefarshim say...
Al ha'adama, no?
Right, so some of the Mefarshim say that what? Remember, you're also going to live long. One day, you're going to need your kids. And when you're Ma'irich Yamim, your kids are going to say, oh, that's how I have a chinuch on how to treat parents. What? Call up Uber Eats, call up the aid service, and put your parents in a nursing home because you make sure it's a good one. You'll call up a good nursing home operator. I was mechabed, boom, boom, boom. So it says Laman Yarichon Yamecha, because since these are all, it's very hard to write exacting details, the Torah tells us, remember, how would you like to be treated when you get old? So I would ask a Rav who says, yeah, do what you think is right for your ruchnias, for your gashmias, for your lifestyle. How would you like when all your kids abandon you? And they said, you know what, we decided for our life this is better. What do you think about that?
I think you're going to a very extreme level. The fact of the matter is, Kibbud Av Machilehu, Mashkehu, Tamod Lefanov. I don't think that it says anywhere, nor do I think any of the Tanoim or Maraim stayed dafke in the city or in the place or in the neighborhood of their parents. I don't think there's any record of that. In fact, there's a record of... Let me
push back at that point. The Sefer Hasidim, right, who was a Rishon, says very clearly that there are others as well, that you should live in the proximity of your parents. He says it's a mitzvah. Nobody knows where he gets his mitzvah from, but he says that. The Aruch HaShulchan, which is much more contemporary and halachic, says on the din that the Shulchan Aruch says in Tav Rishmem that you're allowed to go to Eretz Yisroel because you're allowed to be mevatel Talmud Torah. That Kibbud Av is not doiche Talmud Torah. He says only Talmud Torah. But any other mitzvah, which by the way would include Yishuv Eretz Yisroel, Avada Kibbud Av is not nidche in front of. There is a big body of who say you shouldn't leave the city of your father. Pischei Tshuva brings it, right? So
the Sefer Hasidim, and nobody knows where he gets it from. But right. I'm with you on the Sefer Hasidim, and I'm with you at the Pischei Tshuva, and that all the Achronim say that Mehechatesa. But let me say something which is maybe more important or more nogei l'maisa than the Kibbud Av, because there's ways to do Kibbud Av, and I'll hold mine, take it or leave it, that the mitzvah of Kibbud Av is not to necessarily listen to all their opinions and live your life the way they tell you to live your life, or to live in their proximity. It's just to make sure that they're cared for and to do it in a way that's respectful to them. So, there are people in my Kehillat, and this is very real, it's not a Siman Reish Mem, this is very real, that go back to the United States every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks. They call every day. They make sure that they're cared for. It's the practical part of what's troubling me. What's troubling me about what you're suggesting is that listen, I have a Kehillat which is I'd say 50% Balei Tshuva. If they would listen to their parents, they wouldn't be from altogether.
No, but the Shulchan Aruch says by Eina Isa Ma'aseh Amcha, there's no din of Kibbud Av.
Okay, but it's. We still tell people to do Kibbud Av, and I'm not even suggesting to do it remotely. I'm suggesting not that. I don't think that has to be the machria of the decisions that we make in our life. I think that we have to make sure it's covered. That's all I'm saying. And let people talk to their poskim and their rabbanim as to what they think is right. The more relevant question, and I really want to go there, is it a safe place to do? Is it a safe decision to move to Eretz Yisroel? Is it a safe decision to move your children to Eretz Yisroel? And that's really a good question. There are rabbanim, there are mashgichim that tell people that if your kids are between ages, I don't remember what their shear is, maybe between 9 and 13, disqualified, you're not allowed to move here. The schools are wrong, their kids are going to go wrong, they're going to go the wrong way, don't do it. And, so here's another halachic shaila, if we're speaking on a level of halacha, is that mutter to do? Is it mutter to tell people you're not allowed to live in Eretz Yisrael? Is it mutter to do dibas ha'aretz? There's another parsha, right, of the Meraglim. We got into a lot of trouble. We got a whole Tisha B'Av out of that. Eretz Yisrael, first of all, part of the historical cycle. Baruch Hashem, there's a nest of Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael, in my opinion, and I've lived in a lot of places, as you mentioned at the beginning, Eretz Yisrael there's a different feeling of ruchnius in a very, very derhebena way. There's something very, very special about Torah Eretz Yisrael. There's something very, very special about wherever you go, seeing people, and I'm not even talking about Hasidim or Kohelite, but even seeing, carpenters talking and learning. And there's something beautiful, and you see this everywhere you go. I'm a publisher also, by the way. We have a company called Mosaic Press. So I find myself in printers all the time, in Cholon, in Tel Aviv, and that's what I do. That's actually my parnasa, is I'm a publisher. It's just amazing, the kedushas haaretz, and to deprive your family of that. That's where you need a heter. The heter is not to should I come, or am I allowed to come? The child is, are you allowed to not come? And there are many heterim. One of them might be Kibbud Av. That might be a heter.
Wait. So what would be the chiyuv? Tell me. What halachic chiyuv would it be?
Listen, everything, the whole Torah is based around Eretz Yisrael, is it not?
Wait, so you're saying al mitzvahs yishuv Eretz Yisrael?
But why make it so technical? The whole Tanakh is all about being in Eretz Yisrael and leaving Eretz Yisrael and coming back to Eretz Yisrael. You quoted a pasuk, L'man Yarichun Yomecha Al Ha'adama in Eretz Yisrael. The whole Kriya Shema is about Eretz Yisrael. So, besides for the technical question as to whether, of course, I believe 100% that there's a mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael b'zman hazeh, but I'm not a Satmar Chassid, and I think that's what most of the poskim, Rav Shlomo Zalman, Rav Yashiv, they all took down.
Let's look at this. It's a machlokes Rambam and Ramban, but Pashas, where there's a mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael b'zman hazeh.
Is it a mitzvah, or is it something even bigger than a mitzvah, like tefillah?
Well, but it's machlokes Ramban and Rambam, right?
Right.
Now,
many
poskim, let me just say, and many poskim say that even according to the Ramban, that there is a mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael b'zman hazeh. Right? As Rambam says clearly, you're allowed to live anywhere in the world. You can live in, except for Egypt. He used to sign, I, Moshe, and Maimin, who are over 4 averos a day by living in Egypt. But he writes in the Chazak, he'll live anywhere except for Egypt. Right? But the Ramban holds as a mitzvah. But Ramosha, and he's one of a long list of poskim who say this. Eliezer enumerates many poskim. Holds that it's a mitzvah kiyumis, not a mitzvah chiyuvis. It's sort of like.
But Ramosha also held that you're not allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael, like the Gemara says.
Right, because but it's a mitzvah kiyumis. He writes befarish. He says it's like tzitzis. He says if you have a beged of daled kanfis, you have to wear it. If you don't, you don't. So he says if you live there, leaving is a problem. But moving to Eretz Yisrael, moving to Eretz Yisrael, Ramosha writes it's a mitzvah kiyumis, and there's absolutely no chiyuv. Right, so
I shouldn't make any assumptions. But do you wear tzitzis?
Yeah, I do. But it's a mitzvah. So here's no.
Meaning you don't wait until you're wearing arba kanfos to wear tzitzis. You do this mitzvah kiyum.
Right, without a doubt. But here's my point, though. My point would be is that where it's disruptive to your greater family, and where it could tear you away from parents, and there's a din, there's an altitush teres yimecha, people act differently when their parents are around. So now you have a sveka, right? Maybe we don't hold it's a mitzvah, bizman hazeh. Even if it's a mitzvah kiyumis, I wouldn't have to do it, right? And now, so on top of that, so do I want to play with one of the Aseres HaDibros b'makom sveka? And that's how halachically I would try to define it. Notwithstanding,
I just have to wonder, and I'm sorry to...
Yeah, okay.
No, I just have to wonder, and I don't want to make it too secular, but if the same people that you're talking about were offered a job for $500,000 in Los Angeles, if they wouldn't go, it just seems to me, or if they could be Marbitz Torah in a city. I mean, the Welt went. The Welt goes. Everybody goes. The Tanoim went. The Amoraim went. The Achronim went to where they can go either to be Marbitz Torah. They went Basar Pitoi. They went for Parnasa. People went all over the world. So like Punkt Eretz Yisroel, we shouldn't go to. Eretz Yisroel has l'chol hapachas a mitzvah kiyumis to be Makayim over here. Zichron has a kedushas hachayim, and there's opinions that go so far as kol misha. I'm sounding like more of a Zionist than I really am. I didn't hang up a flag.
I'm a Zionist. I say every day.
No, but I'm saying me too. What I'm saying is I didn't hang up a flag yesterday on Yom Ha'atzmaut, and I didn't say Hallel on Yom Ha'atzmaut, but I so appreciate not just the Kedushas Haaretz, but the fact that there's a renaissance of Torah here. And there's so much in reach, so much Yiddishkeit, and so many. Every building has another Talmud Chacham Nifla. You could say, of course, this is probably true in Lakewood also, but Lakewood is a city. Eretz Yisrael is a country, and it's the country that was promised to us. And it just seems to me that if a person would really hold by the standard that I'm not moving to L.A. or to Chicago, I don't care how much money is involved. I don't care how much, how much health is involved. I don't care what chinuch is for my kids. I'm doing the Kibbud Av thing. Okay, maybe that person, L'shitase, has a gewaldige shaila. Honestly, it's theoretical. I haven't come across it yet, and I've probably talked, as I said, numerous people a week.
But I would agree with you that if somebody says I'm moving to Europe, to England, where I'll see my parents twice a year for a good job. It would be. This certainly has to be better than that, without a suffix.
Okay.
But on the other hand, I know there are people who are makbid, to visit their parents. I know people who didn't do a shidduch till very late in life because they took care of their parents. You do see that there are varying degrees of people's kibbud av. I mean, the Gemara uses.
I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
I'm comparing it to one of us. I think if a person would come to any reasonable person, he says, I can move to England to do a big job, and such a person could for sure go to Eretz Yisroel. But there are people who their kibbud av is on a more sterling level than that. The Gemara talks about. Kol
hakavod to them. But it has to be real. It has to be real, and I still don't think that Kibbud Av means that your parents would rather you be in Borough Park, so that's where you are. I don't think that in the Halacha, you seem to be holding in Reish Mem more than I am, but I don't think in the Halacha there is such a chiyuv. Machileu, kabdeu, layister dvarav, yes. And layister dvarav is lefanav, shalai befanav. You're allowed to disagree with that.
Dvarav is more alt moira than alt kibbud.
That's the only reason. That's the only reason that you have to listen to them.
It's hard to be mechabed somebody if you never see them. Some say the best.
Well, I'm not so sure that's true. You can call every day.
Okay.
You can call every day. You can travel back and forth.
Rabbi, let's talk about the other issue you brought up. Okay, and I think that when you talk about people moving, I think there's a double fear. One fear is I had Reb Shlomo Goldstein by me years ago, and he was talking about moving. And he was talking about moving from one city in the United States, from Borough Park to Muncie to Lakewood. And he said, everybody who moves loses a few kids. And he's an expert in chinuch. So, you have just the concept of dislocation, right? The kids are torn out of their environment, friendships that nurtured with their entire life, neighbors, family, etc. Now you compounding it with, moving to a country where they don't speak the language. They obviously didn't bring their friends and family along, but they don't speak the language. And besides not speaking the language, the cultures are quite different, right?
So let me talk about that a little bit.
Talk about because that's your area of expertise, right? And Israeli.
I hope. Look, let me say something. Historically, immigration and emigration has always been tough for the Jewish people. My grandparents came from Europe, from Poland to America. They were certainly frum, tzaddikim, chashuv yidden. They had 3 sons. My father stayed frum, the other 2 did not. So they went off the derech back then also, and that was immigration. By the way, we're talking about balei tshuva to a great extent, like in my Kehillat. That's a double immigration, so it really is tough. No question about it. That being said, I have to tell you, the Metzius does not bear out what Rabbi Goldstein said. It might have years ago. I don't see it. I don't see, not just in my Kehillat of really a couple hundred families, all Anglos. I speak in English in my shul. I don't see everybody losing any children, frankly, because they moved. It's not, as we say in this country, mitziuti. It's not emes. I do see, look, everywhere you go, there's unfortunately, kids that stray from the way of their parents. I'm sure there's a million reasons for that. Who knows what's going on there. But it's not about moving to Eretz Yisroel. If anything, Eretz Yisroel, in my experience, and I do have this experience, is mechazik them. The caveat is this, and this is what I tried to do, and Baruch Hashem we're being matzliach with. The caveat is that it's not about moving to Eretz Yisroel. You have to move to something in Eretz Yisroel. And I believe that this is the trick. The trick is to move to a Kehillat, and Kehillas are hard to find in Eretz Yisroel. The trick is aseh l'charav. The trick is to make sure you have parnasa when you come to Eretz Yisroel. Make sure you don't fall into a system which is really not you, but it's political. Politics in Eretz Yisroel can get really, really nasty. You got to make sure that. So I think, and this is what I tell people on a regular basis, that if you come and you have a clear plan, and your parents are all set, and you have a clear plan. A clear plan is how are you going to make a living? Who's going to be your Rav? What Kehillah are you going to daven in? Because Kehillah is, a net, as they say, that's ripped apart into threads, can't save anybody. Kehillah is the big net. It's the big safety net that's here. And if you do the things right, the culture, you don't have to, you don't really have to know the language right away. Although I'll tell you that all the kids of Americans and English people and Australians and South Africans are davening in my shul. When the kids play with each other, they're all playing in Hebrew. And I probably, it'll come a time that I'll have to speak in Hebrew. But when I give shiurim for the kids, I talk in Hebrew to the kids. So they do get the culture, and there's parts of the culture, frankly, you don't need them to get. What do they have to learn how to? I don't want to be a Motzi Shemrat Eretz Yisrael, but they don't need to become political, and they don't need to become what some Israelis have become because of the difficulties of life here. So you have a life here in Ramat Beit Shemesh, which the culture is fine. They fit in perfectly. They have groups of chaverim on what they want to do. You want to learn. I have Daf Yomi Shiurim at 5 o'clock in the morning. There's 110 places to daven, exactly 110 places to daven of every different level, every different type in Ramat Beit Shemesh alone, let alone other places, Yerushalayim, bigger places than Ramat Beit Shemesh. So there isn't this problem that he's talking about, the dislocation. Okay, you have to be careful. Chachamein of Bereishai. You have to be careful. But I have not actually seen it. I'm telling you that the Metzius is it's theoretical to me, because in reality, people that come here get chizuk. And many people come here, and I tell my Kehillah, I would say once a month, I said, you came here to Eretz Yisroel, become a tzaddik. And a tzaddik, become a tzaddik means that let HaKadosh Baruch Hu lead your life, and let Torah lead your life. And let's make good decisions about our kids, and let's make good decisions about shidduchim, and good decisions about each other, and not fall into all the traps that even the frum world has fell into. And Baruch Hashem, you know what? everybody's doing fine. Like there could be you and I could be sitting in some koil and dingzach about this, but I see this every day. And by the way, not just my Kehillat. I don't mean that come here, this is the panacea. I'm talking about the Kehillahs wherever I go. I see it's working. And there's so many yeshivas now that are really just tailor-made for these people. It's not like it was even 10, 15 years ago. It's there for them. And there's so much parnasa, Baruch Hashem. There's a high-tech world. You want to be a koil guy. There's koils, certainly there's koils in Eretz Yisroel. Like whatever you want to do. And you know what? Get yourself an in-law apartment and get your parents over here too. If you want my opinion, because it's the best thing for them.
So let me just do a takeaway. This is very important. You're saying that yes, there could be a lot of problems, but if Chacham Eina Bereisha, you could prepare for these problems, and if you come prepared, the problems won't exist. And the biggest I'm saying something much more than that. Okay.
That if you can prepare for those problems and not have those problems, then let's move to the plus side of this equation, and the ruchnius and the beauty, and frankly even the gashmius. It's just beautiful. It's a beautiful life in Eretz Yisroel, and look. I moved here. 12 years ago? I had big stellar in Muncie, big job in the OU. I never looked back once because it's just so beautiful. I'm learning more than I've ever learned. I'm helping more people than I've ever helped. It's just wonderful, and this is something which I think instead of people dwelling on what might be a problem if you move to Eretz Yisroel or not, and I moved all the way to Australia. What might be a problem? I mean, I think we're losing in that equation what not only might be good, but what is good, and why the Gemara tells us that Ein Torah K'Torah Yisrael, because there's a reason for it, and the reason is even today, we shouldn't fool ourselves. We can't be in denial of the bad, as you say, and we can't be in denial of the good. That's the ultimate. But right now, Basher Usham, there's a lot of wonderful Yiddishkeit and holiness, and kids doing great stuff. We started a youth group here in Beit Shemesh, Bnei Hashra. The kids are gung-ho in Torah Yiddishkeit. Got 150 kids. I started a school this year, Netzach Yisrael, packed, beautiful. The kids are doing so well. So I just want to bring out, and maybe I'm going far on it because there's a lot of naysayers, but I don't know that those naysayers are current, and I don't know if they're here trying it the way I'm saying to try it. And I welcome your listenership to call me, and I'm happy to go through the parsha with them step by step.
Rabbi Haber, thank you very much for your time.
I'm so honored that you called me and that I can get a voice out to Klal Yisrael. Ashrecha, keep up the good work.
Thank you. Kol tov.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. We have on the phone with us from Cincinnati, Ohio, Rabbi Avrohom Weinreb. He's the Rav of Zichron Eliezer. That's the shul named after Eliezer Silva. He's originally from Brooklyn, New York. He's a Talmud of the Mir in Yerushalayim. He learned in Chicago, Kyle, was a Rav in Chicago. So he's sort of a displaced Brooklynite who became a Rav out of town. Welcome, Rabbi Avrohom.
Thank you so much.
So anytime we speak about Rabbi Eliezer Silva, we'd be remiss about telling at least one story about him. Could you share a story about Rabbi Eliezer Silva?
So probably the most famous story about Rabbi Eliezer Silva is when he was pulled over and he was speeding, or he was going with his driver was speeding, and they wanted to take him in. And there's different versions to the story. Some say it was in a different country. Some say it was in America. Regardless, the line that he told the officer was that, if you want to mess with me, you have to speak to Senator Taft, who he was very close to. And they called Senator Taft, and Senator Taft was told, there's a rabbi here who says he's from Cincinnati. And he says, tell Senator Taft as the rabbi of America. This is Senator Taft. He says the rabbi of the entire America, and Canada.
Wow.
So that was Eliezer Silva's persona in terms of his way. He had a tremendous influence in the city, and which still is here today. And it's very, very, very pronounced. I think a lot of connections still to him. There's very few people, unfortunately, who remember him, but very much the city is built on his foundation.
So talk to us about, you're part of a Kehillat in Cincinnati. Like, tell us about what's like living in Cincinnati.
Right, so I'm not part of the Kehillat. I came here for the shul. There is an incredible Kehillat here as well, which is booming and making a tremendous influence in the city. Living in Cincinnati, Baruch Hashem, has been for us incredible, really incredible. You know, when this opportunity first came up, we were living in Chicago. We've been there for 10 years, quite comfortable overall. And then we got a few phone calls about the position that was open. At first sounded like a little bit out there. And Baruch Hashem, we started looking into it a little bit more. And we came and visited the city, and something really struck us about what was here. And just in being around, I see it's not even so unique to Cincinnati per se, even though Cincinnati has a lot of unique aspects, but the out-of-town quality is something which is very pronounced here. And what it's done for myself personally, my wife, my children, and really the community who's moved here. You know, it's very interesting that we have a shul of about 130, 140 members. The overwhelming majority of them grew up in the East Coast. Somewhere in the East Coast, somewhere. So it's mostly implants. There's very few people who actually grew up here. And that means people are being attracted here to seeing something which is different than what's happening perhaps in bigger cities in America, and something that's attracting them. And if I kind of can talk about what that is, I think it's something which is very special.
What is that, Rabbi?
So I would focus on a few points. The point which talks to me the most, maybe I would introduce this by way of a story, a short story about personal story. I was the first grandchild that was born to my grandparents, who were both Holocaust survivors. My grandparents lived out in Hartford, Connecticut, also somewhat in the boondocks. And my parents then lived in Brooklyn. And my father called my grandfather. He had an anicle, first anicle after what they went through. They got married in the DP camps. Rebuilding the way they did it was incredible. And he said, making Shalom Zachar Shabbos, first anicle. And my grandfather told him, I'm sorry, I can't come to the Shalom Zachar. You can't come to the Shalom Zachar, it's like the first anicle, you're not coming. He said, this Shabbos in Hartford, he said, there's a bar mitzvah going on. He said, I took on the achrayus for the kashrus to make sure everything was going to be okay. I know if I leave, it won't be the same, and I can't come. And he says, Zog mein inikel, tell my grandchild, as the Zayd is about achrayus. And that's like a story I've heard growing up, and something which is very much part of both my childhood and beyond. And I think that concept of a Baal achrayus on many fronts is probably first and foremost really what pops out as someone who's living in the town, which is smaller, and there's many things that need to be done and can be done. And one of the lines we have in our family is that people often talk about that there are events happening and they're doing it, or there are things going on and they're doing it. And we always say, who is the they? So sometimes the day could be these obscure days, but when you're in a small town and these things have to be done, every person can become the they. And it fosters a sense of achrayus for everything that's going on on a personal perspective. I think there's a sense of achrayus as a parent. In the bigger cities, when we have choices of schools and we send our child to maybe exactly the same type of school that we fit into, there's a certain amount of homogeneous aspect in the school, which we don't have so much. We have a school which is diverse, and there's families of all types of backgrounds, and it really forces a parent to be a parent, and there's no parenting on autopilot. And we even felt that ourselves, the contrast, living in Chicago, living here, there was an achrayus to become a real parent, to be an involved parent, and be on top of everything that's going on, which I think is to us is an incredible thing that brought out in ourselves. It also comes along with the luxury, perhaps you can call it, of the headspace to be involved in both in our children and everything that's going on. There's a tremendous amount of menuchas hanefesh, and that comes along with the out-of-town living, which really gives a lot of greater ability to get involved and be involved, again, both from the community perspective, from the family perspective. And no one's a number. No one person is a number. Every person really has an ability to get involved, and as much as they want to contribute, to be involved in a real way. If a person wants to join the Chevra Kadisha, I always thought growing up the Chevra Kadisha was like some few men that you never heard about and spoke about, like who knows who they were. And like you come here, a person wants to join that, they have the opportunity, they can do that, and they're needed, and there's opportunity for them. A person can join boards of schools and be involved in that. My children, my two oldest daughters, they taught in Sunday school, for years. To me, that was such a beautiful opportunity. Where would they have that opportunity to really make a difference in that way, and a very, very impact? This concept of, Baal Achrayus, both to oneself, to bring out themselves, who they are, their kochos, their abilities, their talents, their Achrayus as a parent, Achrayus as a community member, really is what sticks out probably first and foremost.
What about the impact, what about the impact on the families that sort of lose their kids?
You're saying the ones who live back in the East Coast?
Yeah,
or wherever they're coming from.
A parent has a kid in Cincinnati. They see them. The Einiklach don't know who their Zaydas are. They don't know who their grandparents are. What about that aspect of it?
Right. It's a great point. And the truth is, if I would ask what's the greatest sacrifice living out of town, for sure it's family, without a question. Definitely family. That a person is not going to have that same level. There's no question. The flip side to that, and again, there's nothing that could replace living, and probably the most beautiful thing, you think about the shtetls in Europe where they had the multi-generations living together, and you think about the beauty that, it brings tears to your eyes. There's no question. The flip side to that is that the person's ability to really develop themselves, the parents, we have all the time, Baruch Hashem, parents coming to visit, and in-laws coming to visit, and seeing their children flourishing and thriving. I can't tell you the nachas they have. And they know very often that the children, if they'd be in a bigger city, maybe living with them, they wouldn't be able to be the same people. Their grandchildren wouldn't be the same grandchildren. So it does give a tremendous amount of pride and nachas. And I think that parents who really are able to appreciate how much who their children are and what they can bring out and what they can do, it does give them a tremendous feeling of satisfaction when their children are in the best place for them. And again, it's going to still require visiting, require connection, and find all the ways we can to maintain those ties and those things. And we make a tremendous effort, we get in the car with our whole family, we drive to New York 10 hours, then we make those efforts, and we feel it's important. But the flip side to that, I think that each person really being in a place which is best for them and to bring out their best kochos really is something which is very special, and hopefully the parents also appreciate that, and we see that they do.
Let me ask you a sidebar. What about shidduchim? If you're an older single girl, or not so older, you're 19, you're 20, 22, 23, 24, are there boys in Cincinnati to date?
No. So there aren't really. There are few and far in between, if sometimes if ever. And yes, that's more of a challenge. My oldest daughter, I just came back from Eretz Yisroel like just a little bit ago, is living in New York. And that's truth is, that's very hard for us as parents. It's hard for us. And Baruch Hashem, we try to, she comes back as often as she can, Yom Tov and B'Shor, and Yom Shabbos, and here and there. We try to at least once a month. There's no question that it's hard, and that's certainly, sacrifice. My second daughter actually is coming back now from Eretz Yisroel in a couple of months, and she wants to come back to Cincinnati. So Baruch Hashem, it's a ravach for us. But yes, it's definitely, part of a challenge, and when the child is in Cincinnati, it means they're going to be doing long distance shidduchim, which puts on an extra level of challenge. It's a Shem with Yas B'Shnaya. We've had many goals, and many of those don't come back as a result. And it's certainly an added level of challenge. Hopefully, everyone's in the best place for them, but it certainly creates an extra level of challenge.
So you're saying basically the experience and personal growth are wonderful. It's a sacrifice for the relationship, but ultimately it's best for the children.
The children, for the grandchildren. I mean, the other components, in terms of I mentioned before, the menuchas hanefesh that is relevant. I grew up in Brooklyn, and I sort of know what Brooklyn's all about. I come back to Brooklyn, and my anxiety level goes up, and I have to find a parking space, and I have to people honking me. And those are just the tiny details of it. But it's the overall, taste and frenzy of life, which is a different world.
The Gemara says, Diras Krachim Kasha, right?
Right. And I guess to go with that, a Bayis Nam Achav Zaytish L'Adam. So Bayis Nam doesn't just mean in a beautiful house; it also means in terms of space, in terms of a person's. So the space aspect is incredible.
What does the home cost in the Jewish community in Cincinnati, in the neighborhood?
So we bought our home 7 years ago, a 4-bedroom ranch for $180. It's unfortunately, or I guess fortunately for those who own homes, it's gone up since then, but probably somewhere in the mid to high twos right now, somewhere for that. So that's certainly, the cost of living is another certainly huge component of, in general, certainly housing is different. Overall cost of living is lower. We have tuition vouchers, which is another big component. Every child receives $5,000 from the government towards their tuition, goes straight to the school. The school receives a check for them. So obviously it eases the tuition crunch, and cost of living certainly is a big factor. It's also interesting that
So how much would a house be today? If I wanted to buy a house, somebody's listening and they say, I want to move to Cincinnati. What would an average house in the Jewish community cost?
So mid to high twos is probably the classic regular 4-bedroom ranch or 4-bedroom, somewhere about there. On the higher end, it could be a little over 3. And, if it's really a bigger house, it could be 350.
Which is basically cheaper than New York, than Lakewood, and Muncie, probably by half, right?
At least, yeah, for sure. And it's,
What kind of taxes would you pay? What type of taxes would you pay on the house?
Taxes you pay I pay about 7, somewhere around there.
Which is also around half. Yeah. A little lot more than that.
And, I have 3/4 of an acre of land. And
what are you sacrificing as far as what sacrifices are you making for Yiddishkeit for your kids? If you move to Cincinnati, they don't have as many schools. There's clearly you don't have the kollel you have in New York, in Lakewood, in Muncie. You don't have the big rabbanim. You don't have the. What would you say there's a sacrifice in Yiddishkeit or no?
So everything has two sides. There's two sides of the equation. One aspect you mentioned the choices in school. To me, the fact that a child is exposed to diversity and can appreciate that, and something which you really get the feeling that there's all types of Jews out there and we can relate to them and connect to them, to me is a beautiful thing. And a small example. Tomorrow, there are many people celebrating He'ir Yom Ha'atzmaut, which is tomorrow. And so in our school, we're going to have something. Most of the school is regular Haredi families, and there's some unorthodox families as well, and we feel it's important with community school and we do that. So tomorrow, myself and Rabbi Goldschmidt, who's the unorthodox rabbi, are going to do a presentation Yom Ha'atzmaut. We're going to do a little different, a little unique. I'm going to present why a person should celebrate, and he'll present why a person shouldn't celebrate. And we did this actually last year, a similar presentation, and we did it in high school this year, we're doing it in the middle school. And the feedback we got was, in our shul we don't have any celebration of Yom Ha'atzmaut. In his shul they do. And here we're each going and talking about each other's view of it and why they're doing it. And what sends a message down, which is a trickle-down message to children, it goes to the parents, to everyone, is that we can respect and we can value, we can be different, and that's okay. And we can embrace. And to me, it's a beautiful thing. So some may look at it as a sacrifice. I can't believe my child is going to be in a school with children who are somewhat different than they are, and maybe somewhat diversity. And that's, to me, that's a beautiful thing. And there's so much to be gained by that and appreciated by that. And Baruch Hashem, my children have many, many friends who are very similar to them. And they also have friends who are somewhat different than them. And there's a beauty to that. So, the same thing that some people will call sacrifice can also be something which is, tremendous positivity. The sacrifice of, yes, not having a 9 o'clock minyan or maybe an 8 o'clock minyan on a morning, that's the reality of living in Cincinnati. There's a few minyanim in the morning, a few minyanim at night, and that's what's going to be. We have only one Fleischer kosher restaurant, and some people say, they can't manage Jewish lifestyle with one Fleischer restaurant. So if that's someone's reality, you're right. This is not for them. And overall the focus on the materialism and that whole world of Gashmias is so much lower. There's very little focus on that in terms of the homes people have and the cars they drive. There's such a minimal focus on that, and clothing and all the styles, which is such a beautiful thing. But there's some people that's very important to them. And we've had people who come here, and I try to meet with every couple who comes here to visit, when they come on their pilot trip to see if there's something for them. And I sit with them and talk to them and ask them, what are you looking for? And Baruch Hashem, almost across the board, they're looking for a place they can grow themselves, their family, their children. And the ones who are looking for that, this is the perfect place for them. And people have come, Baruch Hashem, and we've had, since we're here, since we moved here, which was 7 years ago, we've had probably about 60, 65 families move in, which is, substantial growth for our community. And Baruch Hashem, it's been growing. And there's some families who come and they say that's not what they're looking, looking to sort of run away from New York and just try to take New York with them somewhere else where it's lower cost of living or wherever else it may be. And my frank response to them is that, this may not be the right place for you. And I tell them, it's a place, it's a shidduch. It has to make sense. It has to work. And if you're looking just to bring New York somewhere else where it's lower cost of living, it doesn't make sense. It's not the right place. But people who are looking to really develop themselves, develop their children, develop their family, and really be able to maximize who they are and who their family is. They've seen the results of that, and it's really been incredible. People have really grown tremendously in themselves in such a beautiful way.
Well, Rabbi Avrohom, thank you very much for sharing with us all the experience of living in Cincinnati, in general, the experience of living in out-of-town America.
Okay, sure.
Amen. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Let's go to the chosen winner of this week's riddle.
Yeah, hi, my name is Baruch Rich. I just want to try to answer the question from this past week's show. So the first question regarding why it doesn't work as counter as Eimer in the language you'll understand, I would answer that there's certain things like davening where the real reason the Chacham set up a certain nusach, the matbeh shekavah Chachamim, that they set it up in a certain way that it could include everyone, even if they don't really know how to read it themselves. But by Shira Eimer, the Iker Mitzvah is really just to do accounting. So Chachamim didn't set up a specific nusach for it, even though we have to count the days and we have to count the weeks, but they didn't really set up a specific nusach, even though, of course, we all read it from the Siddur, there's a specific way that we say it, but because the whole point of the mitzvah is to count. So if you're not keeping track of what day it is, because you just said the words, is that called accounting? You're never mekayim the Iker mitzvah if you don't know what day you're up to. Regarding the second question, I want to answer that the din of Shmei Ka'ina could help you be mekayim whatever is part of the Iker mitzvah. So by something like Kriyas HaMegillah, there's no Iker mitzvah of standing for Kriyas HaMegillah. And like Rabbi the bracha, there is no Indian on its own to really that you stand for the covet of the bracha. But in the mitzvah itself, there is no reason to stand. You don't have to stand except for covet, which is a separate Indian. So therefore, Shmei Ka'ina can't work for that. But by Sphira, we have a smachta from the lashon of v'kaima, the Rishonim bring, that standing is an ikar part of the mitzvah. So you can't really separate it. If Shmei Ka'ina works for part of the mitzvah, you have to say it works for the entire part of the mitzvah, which means that it also extends to helping me mekayim as if I stood, even if I didn't. Since it's part of the ikar mitzvah, you can't really separate it.